Good morning. 3 minutes after 10 is the time. I hope you're well. I can't be exhausted. I mean, there are two reasons why I can't be exhausted. The one is I cannot feel the psychic toll that seeing your skin colour once again used as a stick with which to beat public figures can apply to me. It can never apply to me. Even if you found somebody who was deploying racist tropes about white-skinned people, such is the privilege and power that white people enjoy in this population at this point in history, that it would never feel discriminatory. You could line up 50 people of colour screaming all sorts of abuse about white-skinned people, and it really wouldn't matter in the great scheme of things, because they have no power to hurt me institutionally, politically, legislatively. It is why the best definition of racism I've come across over the years is prejudice plus power, something that some people work incredibly hard to pretend not to understand. So I can't be exhausted on that level. And the other reason why I can't be exhausted is loyalty. The other reason why I can't be exhausted is loyalty to you, and the knowledge that when you are exhausted, my job is to remind everybody, whether they're exhausted or not, why this is an important moment in our story, why this is a really important moment in our story. And that means that I can't come on air and talk about exhaustion. I mentioned to you yesterday that my inbox contained the words tired and exhausted more than any others, because for people of colour, for women of colour, for black women specifically yesterday, it felt like a day of intolerable burden. How can this even be a story? I think that the decision we took together to treat it as a opportunity to vent and condemn was completely correct. Gratifying yesterday as the day progressed to see only a few fairly fetid corners of the media pretending that this was some sort of debate, that this was some sort of dialogue, that this was a conversation that could accommodate some sort of balance. The idea that there would be a counterpoint to the statement that what Frank Hester had said was truly disgusting, profoundly racist, and possibly insightful. All of that is just true, but it doesn't stop it being any less exhausting. And in some ways, I presume it becomes even more exhausting today, because today the tail has started wagging, if you like. The attempts to obfuscate, the attempts to do something other than what is obviously necessary. A profound condemnation. You cannot call for Frank Hester to do anything. He's an extremely rich private individual. He claims he's apologised, but he hasn't. He's apologised for being rude. He hasn't apologised for being racist or for calling for Diane Abbot to be shot, which makes some of the comments by senior politicians yesterday, some of the very late in the day comments by the Women and Equalities Minister. I can at least pause there to have a sniggle, can't we? The Women and Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, and the Prime Minister shortly afterwards, Rishi Sunak, coming out with a form of words that sought to pour oil upon the waters of discontent. But in many ways, if you were paying attention, and frankly you should have been, but if you weren't, don't worry, I was, sought to pour oil on the water, but in many ways made things worse. So we find ourselves today looking at the desperation of Rishi Sunak's cabinet to move on from this. Just as we said yesterday, in the absence of what needs to be done, which is a straight condemnation, a disassociation, and the return of the money. Philip Cowley, the esteemed columnist, makes a fairly powerful point, or a pertinent point, that one of the reasons perhaps why the Tories would be reluctant to do that is because Frank Hester could turn around and give the money to one of the sort of increasingly extreme parties, even further to the right than the Conservative Party, that seem to be fighting over it's usually between 10 and 15% of the vote, isn't it? So, I think that happened once before, didn't it? Didn't Aaron Banks increase his donation to, I forget what party it was. It could have been UKIP or the Brexit Party or whatever they were calling themselves at the time, whatever the publicity vehicle designed exclusively to propel Nigel Farage into the forefront of public life in Britain was called at the time. I'm pretty sure that Banks chap increased his donation after a Conservative politician said something mean about him. So the fear that the money will go to your rivals and improve their ground game may perhaps be propelling some of the Tory failure to do what is obviously right, what is obviously correct. So the question of why aren't they doing it currently only has 10 million answers. Why aren't they doing it? 10 million pounds. Why aren't they saying to him, we cannot have anything more to do with you? Answer, 10 million pounds. I don't think there's any room for further conversation or debate. If he'd donated £5, they'd have slung him out by his ear. They'd have hung him out to dry. If he'd donated £50, he'd be under a bus, metaphorically speaking. If he had donated probably £500,000, he would be surplus to requirements, persona non grata, heading for the door. But he's donated £10 million. £10 million. I think the largest donor currently in the game. Because the sensible ones have all tacked towards the centre and started backing the Labour Party, and the insensible ones have all started giving money to the coterie of increasingly far-right parties, even further to the right of the Tory party, setting up television stations and trying to buy newspapers. So there's not a lot left to fight for, and this Frank Hester character seems to have his fingers on most of the money that is left to fight for the Tories. So there are 10 million reasons why it doesn't happen. Where do you want to start today? I'm going to start, if I may, with... Actually, let's start with some of the comments coming from Kevin Hollinrake this morning, who is the Post Office Minister, but he drew the short straw. He has to go out and try to defend the indefensible. And then I'm going to tell you the thing that upset me most yesterday. And do you know what? I'm not going to apologise to you for using the word upset. I mentioned to you yesterday that when Sadiq Khan used the word heartbroken, it jarred me. It jarred me. It moved racism out of the context of conversations we have on the radio into the real and lived experience of friends and colleagues and public figures. And he talked about being heartbroken, and the conversation about 30p Lee ceased to be a topic or a line of questioning, and it became a moment of humanity. I felt that Diane Abbott visited similar territory yesterday when she talked about being frightened, when she referenced being a single woman and therefore already conscious of her vulnerability in the public space. And she processed the news, not only that a man who has given £10 million to her colleagues on the Conservative benches in the House of Commons had called for her to be shot, but that her colleagues were not sufficiently perturbed or repulsed by this rhetoric to return the money and tell Frank Hester to sling his hook. That became a moment of humanity. Heartbroken, frightened, hurt. These aren't topics. These aren't lines of inquiry to pull off a piece of paper when a politician is sitting in front of you. These are instances of shared humanity about which we should all be heartbroken, frightened, hurt. And we're not. Kevin Hollinrake certainly isn't.
Clearly, donations are important for all political parties. I think one of the things you would judge when anybody's making a donation is this person the right kind of person to be making a donation? Is somebody racist?
And the answer is,
as far as I know, Mr. Hester, I don't know him. From what he said, he accepts his comments were wrong and they were racist, and he's apologised for them. So I don't think that means Mr. Hester is a racist, but that's a judgment others will make
so
if somebody wants to make a donation.
He can say racist things, but he himself is not racist.
Well, if you say racist things and don't apologise for them, that would make you a racist. But I think if you say something racist and then apologise, that's a different thing, I think.
Why? Why would, on the evidence of our own eyes, I don't know him either, you don't know him, he said something racist here, which he has apologised for, but he is apparently not a racist person.
Well, I know of people, we all come across people at times that say racist things, but are not racist. And I think that's, I say he said something that was wrong, he said something that was inappropriate, he said it in a completely different context, but I think the way he said that does connect somebody's skin colour with their character, which is the wrong thing to do, and that's why he's apologised.
Do you think this man is the right character to have an OBE still?
As I say, as far as I don't know Mr. Hester, he's apologised for what he said. His comments were wrong. Those comments were racist in the context he said them. So he's apologised for them. That's what we should judge people by. If you make a mistake, do you apologise for it? That's clearly what he has done.
There's a massive problem here. There is a huge problem here. And it is the very simple fact that Frank Hester has not apologised for being racist. He has not acknowledged that his comments were racist. He has apologised for being rude. And that's why I found Kemi Badenoch's comments yesterday at best disingenuous and at worst pretty gross. I don't know how you feel about this. I don't know if you feel that I'm trivialising things, but I'll read you what Kemi Badenoch said. I'll tell you what is disingenuous about it. And then I'll tell you the bit that upset me the most. And I use the word upset. So Badenoch wrote, Hester's 2019 comments, as reported, were racist. I welcome his apology. Abbot and I disagree on a lot, but the idea of linking criticism of her to being a black woman is appalling. It's never acceptable to conflate someone's views with the colour of their skin. And she split this into two tweets, which she doesn't, I don't think, have to do because she's got one of those verified grey ticks. So why would you split it into two tweets? And I can tell you as a fairly successful user of Twitter that if you put out a two-tweet thread, the first one gets read 3 to 4 times more than the second one does. So what's in the second one? MPs have a difficult job balancing multiple interests, often under threats of intimidation, as we saw recently in Parliament. Some people make flippant comments without thinking of this context. If I said now that I want someone to shoot Kemi Badenoch, hands up if that would be flippant. Come on. Come on, hands up. Someone, if I called for a politician to be shot, I don't mean it, obviously. No one's actually going to shoot, but I'm calling for it. What if I say it in a funny accent? Would that work? I'd say, oh, someone should shoot Kemi Badenoch. Is that flippant now? No, come on, hands up if it's flippant. Anyone? Some people make flippant comments without thinking of this context. This is why there needs to be space for forgiveness where there is contrition. Well, I have seen no contrition. I have seen a man desperately trying to save his own backside because the 10 million quid he's invested in the hope of at least a knighthood and quite possibly a seat in the House of Lords alongside people like Michelle Mone, Evgeny Lebedev and Daniel Hannan seems to be disappearing over the horizon faster than you can say, what a racist clown. So his 10 million quid investment in a peerage is disappearing over the horizon. He's desperately trying to pretend things aren't as bad as we know they are, so he's apologised for being rude. And up pops the sniggle, Women and Equalities Minister, to claim that it's a flippant comment made out of context and that there should be forgiveness because there is contrition. Problems with this include there is nothing flippant about calling for somebody in public life to be shot. There is nothing flippant about calling for the politician who quite possibly has been on the receiving end of more abuse and more vile, misogynistic and racist insult than any other person alive in this country. At risk of hyperbole, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. There is nothing flippant about any of that, and there is nothing contrite about a man denying he's been racist and apologising for being rude. I need this job some mornings because otherwise I'd think that the world was slipping out of focus. People I respect and admire were queuing up to compliment Kemi Badenoch last night on doing the right thing when she didn't. And I still haven't told you the bit in that twin tweet, that very deliberately separated tweet so that 4,000 people liked the first one but only 1,000 liked the second one. I still haven't told you the bit that upset me the most. That does not deserve praise. That is passing off the comments about Diane Abbott being someone that makes Frank Hester want to hate all black women as flippant. 10 million reasons why Kemi Badenoch, who hopes to be the next leader of the Tory party, would not want to go further. And then, even worse, claiming that there has been contrition when there hasn't. He has not apologised for being racist. He has apologised for being rude. So whether it's Kevin Hollinrake or Kemi Badenoch or Rishi Sunak, claiming that some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of accommodation has been reached because this man has apologised, they're lying. Whether they're lying to themselves and to you, or just to themselves, I do not know. But they are lying. He has not apologised for being racist. He has not accounted for his calls for Diane Abbott to be shot. He has moved into the public space comments, opinions and words that are borderline criminal. Diane Abbott has gone to the police, quite rightly. A man was in Crown Court in this country last month for sending a raccoon emoji to a mixed race. A black man was in Crown Court last month in this country for sending a raccoon emoji to a mixed race Conservative candidate. And that's why I'm really scared today, because I think that they're going to normalise this now. I think you're now going to say, no, you can say what you want. You can call for MPs to be shot if they're black. I'm pretty sure that if the MP in question was white, everyone would be quite rightly talking about David Amess at the moment and Joe Cox, but they're not. We are. I'm pretty sure that this is evidence that they have, whether wittingly or unwittingly, whether consciously or unconsciously. I'm pretty sure that they are hoping that they, and therefore Frank Hester, can get away with this, that Frank Hester emerges with his reputation in tatters, but his status within the Conservative Party undimmed. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I still haven't told you the bit from Kemi Badenoch's intervention that I found the most crass, the most insensitive, the most unpleasant. She could have called her Diane. At the very least, she could have called her Diane Abbott. We refer to politicians by their surnames quite often on the programme for brevity and for impact. But if you're talking about death threats, if you're talking about being a recipient of vile racism, and you are taking the time to put your thoughts down in print, to type them, to read back over what you've written, I don't believe that you accidentally confine your comments to a surname, to the stark singularity of a surname. Abbott, not even Diane, not Diane Abbott. Abbott and I disagree on a lot. The second line, the third sentence of this mealy-mouthed attempt to get herself as Women and Equalities Minister off the hook for failure to act, failure to respond, failure by her entire party to do the right thing. The third sentence, Abbott and I disagree on a lot. Who cares? Your job today is to be Women and Equalities Minister and to stick up for a woman who's on the receiving end of some of the vilest abuse any politician in this country has received in my lifetime. From a public figure, a public-ish figure, a £10 million party donor. And you couldn't even pay her the courtesy of using her Christian name, of using her given name, of calling her what her friends call her. I mean, where do you go next on this? 21 minutes after 10 is the time. I'll tell you what we do. We do what we did yesterday. How do you respond to the idea that it's okay to say racist things, really racist things? It's okay to call for a politician to be shot as long as you apologise for being rude. 0345 6060 973. It's absolutely fine to call for a black politician to be shot as long as you later apologise after being caught for being rude. That's the view of the Prime Minister. That's the view of the Women and Equalities Minister. That's the view of the Post Office Minister. That is the view of the British government. The government of the United Kingdom considers it to be perfectly acceptable for a man to publicly call for a politician to be shot, to describe her in the most profoundly and vile racist terms, as long as he later apologises for being a bit wooed. That's your government. That's your Prime Minister. That's the Prime Minister of every black woman in this country. That's the Women and Equalities Minister who is supposed to speak for every woman in this country, every minority in this country. That's the Conservative Party. That's the British government telling the British people, perfectly fine, as long as you say, sorry for being rude. To call for an elected parliamentarian to be shot, to talk about how she, as a black woman, makes you want to hate all black women. And you issue a pathetic so-called apology mentioning only your own rudeness and claiming that your comments about a black woman making you hate all black women has nothing to do with gender or skin colour. And the Women and Equalities Minister gives you a free pass because she's pretending that you've displayed contrition. The Prime Minister gives you a free pass because he's got a £10 million cheque burning a hole in his pocket. This isn't a party political issue. This is a national issue. This is an issue of patriotism. 0345 6060 973 is the number to tell me how it makes you feel today. 10:27 is the time. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I went somewhere I haven't gone before on the radio, and that's why I went to that last break, even by my standards, unconscionably late. So I'll start taking your calls after the past news. Before that, here's another example of the minister charged today with defending the indefensible, with seeking to justify the move of blatant and profound racism into the heart of the Tory party's public-facing side, on the grounds that you can be as racist as you want as long as you then later apologise for being rude. This is Kevin Hollinrake on Sky News.
Should the Conservative Party return the money he donated?
I don't think that's the right thing to do. I don't think it's what we need to do. I think his comments were clearly racist and wrong, and there's no question about that. You don't judge somebody's character based upon their skin colour. He's apologised for that. I don't think that means Frank Hester is necessarily a racist. I don't know Frank Hester, to be honest, but the fact he's come out and apologised, we should welcome that. I think he's trying to apologise personally to Diane Abbott over these comments, and that's the right thing to do. But I don't think that means we should judge his character purely based on something that was said in a private conversation that he's apologised for.
It's interesting you say so clearly that the comments were clearly racist. I had a conversation with Graham Stewart, one of your colleagues, yesterday, and clearly it took till the Prime Minister till late yesterday afternoon to say the same. So what happened in the first 24 hours such that your colleagues, your boss, couldn't say that?
I can't speak for the Prime Minister because I haven't spoken to him about it. I've spoken to Graham about it. I mean, the situation was moving pretty quickly yesterday, and but I think as I said before, I don't think it's right to judge somebody's character by their skin colour. That's effectively what his comments said. So it was clearly the wrong thing to say. He's apologised for it. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think in terms of those comments, clearly they were racist. He's right to apologise. The Prime Minister's called them racist too. But I think the key thing now is Mr Hester himself a racist. I don't believe so from what I know. I say I don't know him. But I think on the context of what we know, in the situation that we know right now, we should try and move on from this now. And I think I think that's the right thing to do.
He hasn't apologised for being racist. He has not apologised for judging somebody's character by the colour of their skin. He's apologised for being rude. This is madness, actually. I mean, those two clips that I've played, I selected because I thought that they were good interviews. I thought that people had done a good job of making Hollinrake look like an idiot, but Hollinrake did it all himself. He hasn't apologised for being racist. Why is everybody pretending that he has? Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. Actually, this is on the same subject in a way, but I'll just leave it with you very briefly before we hit the phones. Imagine if Meghan Markle had been busted for manipulating a photograph of her children, busted by the biggest picture agencies in the world, busted so completely and so comprehensively that she had to issue an apology and a quotes, explanation, end quotes. Imagine if Meghan Markle had done that. And now imagine what British newspapers and much of the British public would be doing. It's just an illustration of double standards. I'll leave you to work out the rest. Margaret's in Enfield. Margaret, what made you pick up the phone?
You, James, for just keeping it real, for just letting people who are feeling so upset and so angry and so frustrated to be able to have a platform and say that, and I'm really pleased that you picked up that very trite apology or statement from Kemi Badenoch, and I'm going to say it. I am a black woman, and I'm going to say it. It was an opportunist. That's an opportunist apology. I've been saying it all day yesterday because if she doesn't realise, this man is talking about her. He's talking about every single black woman who is walking on this earth in the United Kingdom or across the universe, that when he sees Diane Abbott, he wants to hate all black women. Let's keep that for a moment. Do you know how that makes people feel?
No, I don't.
Do you know how that makes me feel?
No, I don't. You know I don't.
I'm all night I've just been so wondering, what can I do to let people understand I am so tired of this, I am so upset of this, and I am so sick of people making excuses. We had the Prime Minister out last week talking on the doorstep about division and hatred, and because I assume George Galloway won but then this week, on yesterday, he couldn't even come out and say anything about the same division and hatred that is being peddled against one of his peers, the Right Honourable, one of his colleagues. If it was any other situation and a black person had said they want to shoot someone, the police would have been at their door. Why are the police not at this person's door? It's a hate crime, James. I feel frightened. I was on the tube today and I'm thinking to myself, does anybody really know how I am feeling? Does anybody know how us black women are feeling as we're travelling to work, thinking somebody might want to just shoot us because this person has made that statement about how he feels about us? We've not done anything to him.
And he hasn't been squished. It's the failure to squish him. It's the failure to shut this down absolutely immediately, as if someone had broken the glass, Margaret, and the alarm has gone off, and Sunak and Badenoch are wandering around going, oh, well, he's said sorry for setting the alarm off, so let's ignore it.
But James, he hasn't said sorry.
I know he hasn't said sorry.
He said sorry for being caught. He has not said sorry for what he said.
For being rude, Margaret, for being rude.
Hello. That is racist. No, James. Rude, right, is actually just being courteous to people and actually talking over people and not hearing what people have to say. This is out and out racism, and everybody said it yesterday. If it was another word rather than black woman, then we would be calling it out, and rightly so. So people of the world need to understand and know, as a black woman and as black women, we are no longer going to stand for this. If I could do something on the streets of London, just demonstrating and saying, we are tired of being called out in this kind of way, and it has to stop. And if allies are not going to help us, then we're going to have to help ourselves, because it is unacceptable that Diane Abbott or any black woman should have to fear walking on the streets, or any woman, because of the colour of their skin.
Of course, if you did take to the streets of London to protest, Suella Braverman would call for you to be arrested, Margaret.
Yeah, I hear that, but it would be a peaceful one.
That doesn't matter, mate. That doesn't matter, Margaret. Straight to jail for you under Suella's glorious rule. I don't care how peaceful it is. You're a hate marcher. How dare you march against something I don't understand or agree with? It's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. So when people say about this is the most diverse and multicultural cabinet, right? Well, I tell you what, it's probably the most racist as well. And white people as well, can call it out, because if it, I'm not even going to do the duck allergy, but it is outright racism.
It's cracking.
And sexism, and it has to stop.
Well, thank you. I still don't know how you feel. I have a better, because I can't, can I? It's not. I mean, empathy can take you so far. I cannot know what it is like to feel what you feel. When Diane Abbott used the word frightened and brought her single status into the conversation, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that my ears, I went, God, I hadn't thought of it from that angle. The notion of vulnerability for women in general, for black women in particular, for black women politicians who've seen a £10 million Tory donor call for them to be shot, and then have your own parliamentary colleagues queuing up on breakfast television to essentially excuse him on the grounds that he's apologised for being rude. It is absolutely as mad as it looks. And it is extraordinary that all of the white men in the UK media have failed this morning to pick up upon the appalling, mealy-mouthed nature of the government's response, from Rishi Sunak down to the Women Inequalities Minister, through to the politicians that have been doing the studio rounds and failing utterly to acknowledge the gravity of the situation and the scale of the offence and the upset caused to all of us in some ways, but to people like Margaret, much more so. 10:41 is the time. Jennifer's in Waltham Forest. Jennifer, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
Kind of following up from Margaret's point, I wanted to kind of express that, you know, our government, especially, they kind of, you know, promote this, I don't know, they try and promote this image of, you know, Britain is such a diverse country and we're in all shapes and sizes and, you know, we're all, you know, at the end of the day, British people are all one people. But for them to kind of excuse comments like this, which, mind you, were made back in 2019 and have only come to light today, it's appalling. Firstly, comments made in 2019, the only reason he's, well, quote unquote, apologised for it today is because it's come out in the news. If it wasn't for that, he would never have said
But
sorry.
he's apologised for being rude. He hasn't apologised for being racist or for calling for Diane Abbott to be shot. Unless you file, as Kemi Badenoch has tried to do, file calling for Diane Abbott to be shot under rude and or flippant.
No, as in, I don't believe that he's apologised either, but I'm saying it kind of ironically.
Of course. No, I
he's not
understand.
apologised. And if he wasn't called out in 2019, the only reason he's being called out today is because of the fact that it's made the news. And as the Tory minister said, they're happy to keep accepting his money.
They're happy to take more.
Yeah, exactly. They're happy to take more.
What does that tell you?
Just move on with life.
What does that tell you when you hear them say, and listen, I'm not defending or excusing, but it's possible that particular comment doesn't come with number 10 sanction, but that we won't know until later, if ever. What does it say to you when they say, this bloke who called for the black woman to be shot, this bloke who's done the racism on an almost unimaginable scale, even by the standards of a country in which Nigel Farage is some sort of public figure? How does it make you feel to know that your government would take another 10 million quid off him if he got his checkbook out?
It's terrifying. To me, it just isolates us further. As black people in this country, we've struggled for decades and decades and decades. And, you know, for us, for the government and kind of society in general to be promoting this image of, you know, inclusivity, we're all the same Britain, we all have the same values and so on and so forth. For something like this to happen, the government is really showing their position on where they stand with people of colour. It's not just black people, but people of colour in general.
Well, he had a crack at Indians.
He
had a crack at Indians at the same meeting, saying that if there wasn't any room for them, they could climb on a train roof during a crowded meeting.
Exactly, and it just shows that although they kind of, you know, want to make it seem like, you know, we're all British and this and that, at the end of the day, they don't care about us. And that's just what it is. They don't care if they hear our feelings. They don't care about the consequences of what they say, how what they say makes us feel. They want to, I feel like they want to isolate us. They want us to know that, okay, you're British in the sense that, you know, you might have a British passport, you might work in Britain, you might pay your taxes, but you are not one of us. We are not the same. And if worse comes to worse, if we have to kind of, if something happens where, you know, we have to, what should I say? If we have to kind of make it clear who we really, you know, work for and who we care about, it's not you. We don't care about you.
I can't argue with you today. I don't know how I would even begin to tell you not to feel that way, except to say that the Tory party, the current government, is not the United Kingdom. And that a different party, a different government, and many, many millions of people who are not black, who are not of colour, will be as outraged and disgusted as you are, but will not feel it in the same. Do you know what you've reminded me of?
No.
I've just remembered. You heard Margaret a minute ago say, "Do you know how I feel?" And I said, "No, I don't. I can't. Can I? No." But do you know what Frank Hester would have said?
No.
He'd have said, "Yes, I know exactly how you feel because my parents were Irish immigrants." That's what he would have said. That was part of his quotes apology. I've just remembered.
It's ridiculous.
It's beyond ridiculous. I know exactly how you feel, Jennifer. Don't worry. I've got this covered.
And it's like they're minimising our experience by saying, "Oh yeah, my parents were immigrants from Ireland." Okay, but it's not even okay. I'm not trying to dispute that or anything. You know, okay,
of course there was racism directed towards Irish people, but to say that I know what it's like to be a black woman on the
do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, you're still white. At the end of the day, you still speak the same language. You didn't come from a war-torn country where, you know, you had to flee in a boat, or, you know, your family was separated and there's a lot of things going on in your country. Your government is corrupt. You've come to a country where you don't speak the language. You've tried to make a life for yourself. And your generations are carrying on that legacy in a space where you had to sacrifice a lot to come here.
I don't want to open up the
what I mean?
Pandora's box of Irish history, but the central thrust of what you say is absolutely on the money. It really is. 10:46 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So, I mean, listen, I don't know that Jennifer's analysis is correct, that they're sitting there deliberately seeking to make people like Jennifer and I mean, thousands of people, millions of people looking at the current landscape and thinking they are deliberately ignoring us, they are deliberately isolating us further. It may be, if you look at exactly the same events through the other end of the telescope, it may be that they are simply not thinking about you at all and trying to hold on to the racist vote, which is in danger of leaching towards reclaim or reverb or reform or whatever they're called this week. That is probably the more motivating fear, but it doesn't excuse, it simply explains. And those people exist. I see them in my inbox. They're probably currently waving Donald Trump flags. Those are the votes now that the Tories are fighting for. In fact, I wonder if they're the only votes now that the Tories are fighting for. The people who are comfortable with what Frank Hester did, or perhaps even approving of what Frank Hester did. But my God, if you've gone that low as a politician that you're cozying up to the people pretending that this isn't a big deal, or the people pretending that he's apologised, or the people pretending that taking his money isn't a grim pollution of public life in this country, of politics, in every sense, a grim pollution, a gross pollution of British politics, then maybe it's time for a career change. 10:47. 10:52 is the time. This is from Beatrice. Is it the same Beatrice that was telling me about her cat? We shall find out shortly. I'm listening to people call into you, and their emotional reactions are another nail in the coffin. The belief that their government openly leaves them vulnerable to racism, actively supports the dehumanisation and incitement of violence by a prominent, powerful donor, a key member of the Conservative establishment. This resonates. And Beatrice speaks of how she feels it's a similar emotional experience to when a disabled or chronically sick person applies for help from the state and the state responds by torturing and punishing them. That phrase, isolation, further isolates us. Rishi Sunak delivers a speech. We played a bit of it yesterday. Can you dig it out again? Rishi Sunak played a speech, gave a speech on Friday talking about the need for unity, the need for coming together, and yet here he is pretending that this £10 million Tory donor has apologised for being racist when he has done nothing of the sort. He's apologised for being rude. What a grim story this is. Rowan's in Maidstone. Rowan, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. First time caller here.
Take your time.
Basically, I'm born and raised in Hackney. Born in hospital. I'm from Hackney originally, and I have black children, and I am just so shocked. And I don't know Diane Abbott,
No.
but I knew that she was our MP for Hackney.
She still is,
And I'm
actually.
just-
She's not a Labour MP anymore.
Understood. But I'm just so shocked, disappointed, upset that we have, I'm wondering who is the adults in the room? Because Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister of colour, clearly isn't. Because let's call a spade a spade. And I like what your last caller said. For example, if I stole £10 million and I got caught, and I got caught and I apologised, that still make me a thief. But listen, that still make me a thief.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it is. And
the other bit, actually, you've just reminded me of, was that politician, one of the ministers this morning, saying that you shouldn't, what he said in a private meeting can't be used to prove that he's racist. As if, I mean,
come on.
but that's exactly where you're going to say the things that you know you shouldn't really say publicly, isn't it? That's even madder than I realised at the time, Rowan.
I'm just saying, as a young black man, 34, with black children, that's racist. My family came from Guyana back in the 1960s. They went through a ton of the racism. But now, see what that person said. Wow. And for them to not say, look, man, you take your money, clear off, sling your hook. That is racist.
That's all they need to do. That's all. We cannot be associated with this.
I'm looking at Rishi Sunak thinking, okay, you're clearly not the elephant in the room. you're not in charge here, you know. So who's in charge? So this person is looking to get like a knighthood or go like someone needs to say, someone who's higher than Rishi Sunak needs to say something and be like, look, come on, man, you can't say that about black women, about anyone in general. Like let's call it out. White women, black women. Women
makes me want to hate all. I mean, listen. If he'd said that bloke on the radio makes me want to hate all radio presenters, that would be okay because that wouldn't be judging my character based upon an immutable characteristic or a. But if he'd called for me to be shot, we wouldn't be having this conversation about whether it was acceptable or not. If someone called for Rishi Sunak to be shot, we wouldn't be having a conversation about the nuances or the difference between a public and a private comment. We just wouldn't.
But even the part where they said he called for Diane Abbott to be shot, like what are we seriously? We live in 2024. How could you say that about someone? And she's the first black MP of my old area. Like, she's the first black MP. Okay, female. I don't necessarily agree with some of the policies and some of the stuff she puts forward. But give her her respect.
Human respect. I mean, I like your anger. Shock, actually. I like the way that you've conveyed what it feels like when this story lands in your lap, out of nowhere almost, as you say, as a young black father, suddenly realising what the government stands for in 2024. And I don't accept some of the voices telling me that I shouldn't be so shocked. I'm not shocked. I'm disgusted. I suspected what they were like, but I believed there were lines that would never be crossed, and they got crossed for the first time this weekend or this week. It's not good enough to say, oh, you know what they're like. It's obvious what they're like. We've known since 2016. We've known since Enoch Powell. We've known since Boris Johnson. No, the lines that you don't cross involve things like calling for a politician to be shot because she's black, which is as near as damn it to what this man did. Describing someone appearing on television and making you hate everyone possessed of the same gender and skin colour. Those were lines that have not been crossed before by somebody of Frank Hester's status. And if they had been, he would have been cut down. He would have been dispensed with. He would have been sent packing. And he hasn't been. They are lying about his apology because they think you're stupid and they know that most of the media will either back them corruptly or not notice, not take the time to actually look between the lines of what is being said and report back to you that what is being said by Rishi Sunak, by Kemi Badenoch, by Kevin Hollinrake, by Graham Stewart is a lie, a blatant lie, a lie that makes them complicit in the racism they claim to condemn because he has not apologised for being racist. He has not apologised for calling upon an unspecified assassin to shoot Diane Abbott. He's apologised for being rude while denying that what he said was racist. So that, I think, is today's takeaway, isn't it? That absolutely extraordinary conspiracy of circumstance that today presents Frank Hester to you as someone that the government can continue to do business with because he has apologised for his racism, when he categorically and clearly has not. And it turns out I'm not alone in finding Kemi Badenoch's decision to refer to Diane Abbott in this most horrible of circumstance as Abbott, like a school headmistress, like a teacher or a prison officer, to call her solely by her surname while purporting to condemn what has been done to her, despite misrepresenting and apparently misunderstanding what has actually happened. And that's where, I'm afraid, that the pursuit of the racist vote, the desperation to cling to the support of the kind of people that propelled Liz Truss and Boris Johnson to the very top of the Conservative Party, leads any ambitious Tory into these hideous, hideous depths. 3 minutes after 11 is the time. Prince Harry did tell them this would happen, but they ignored him. In fact, they completely ignored him, even when 70 politicians signed a letter condemning the colonial nature of much of the coverage of his wife's arrival in the royal family. But the Daily Mail has turned on Kate and William today with the columnist, Sarah Vine, writing, well, this is the headline on the front page, Wills and Kate should come clean about what's really going on or they'll drown in a quagmire of their own making. And the picture editor has very deliberately chosen a photograph in which the wife of the few, in which Kate Middleton looks stern and unforgiving, as opposed to, the sort of soft focus, lovey-dovey stuff that she has become used to. And Harry told them this would happen. They won't, when they want to come for you, when it suits them to come for you, they will come for you, no matter how far you've bent over backwards and how many members of your own family you've thrown under a bus in order to try to keep Fleet Street sweet. They are an insatiable maw. M-A-W. I think I've used that word correctly. Been playing a bit of Scrabble lately. An insatiable maw. And you can never feed them. It's a bit like racism. Well, actually, in the case of Meghan Markle, it's a lot like racism. You can't appease them. They're never going to go, even if you're a black politician. Going, hi, racists, I'm on your side. Here's some fantastic comments that prove it. They're never going to change their ways, never going to cease to be racist. They might put up with you because they think that you indulge their prejudices. Oh, I don't mean you when I talk about racists, but they do, ultimately. That was something that came through, I think, in the last hour of the conversation. I'm not going to move on. I'm going to approach it from slightly different angles, invite some slightly different contributions, and I'll tell you why I'm not going to move on at 5 minutes after 11. It's because it would feel wrong, actually, regardless of editorial decisions or the usual process of working out what I'm most interested in. It would feel very wrong simply to move across the palette of our emotions, to go from the hurt and the heartbreak, the fury and the anger that we have been listening to move anywhere else, to move into... do you know what I was going to talk about today? What day is it? It's Wednesday. So I've got day 3 of the week. I haven't touched on it really, except in passing, but I was actually going to talk about the photo. I was actually going to talk about the bizarre scenario in which Kensington Palace, which is where Prince William and his wife, William and Kate, live. As I get older, I find the titles more and more ridiculous. Not just for Andrew Windsor, but arguably for all of them. But anyway, where William and Kate live, their operation, the calculation seems to be that all of this crazy speculation is better than the truth. That's the point, isn't it? At which, regardless of what you think about the royal family, you have to recognise their status as the pinnacle of our hierarchical society. If the UK was a Ponzi scheme, they'd be the ones making all the money. So I don't really care about your, it's not very interesting, talk about something else criticisms. At the point at which this happens, it becomes interesting. The point at which some of the conspiracy theories that I have seen, as someone who doesn't even follow this story, but occasionally gets his ear bent by a colleague like Keith, I have been told that current conspiracy theories include, I saw one on Twitter where someone had taken a photograph from the front page of Vogue a few years ago and attempted to prove that was actually the photograph of Kate Middleton that was used in the photograph ostensibly taken this weekend in the garden of, I don't know, some fancy palace somewhere with leaves in the background. So that was the conspiracy theory number one. The maddest one I've seen under the hashtag Katespiracy is that one of the children has accidentally killed their mother, or deliberately, perhaps, and they're trying to cover it up. To which you sort of respond by thinking, that's a very short-term ploy, isn't it? I don't quite see how that... So the bonkers stuff is out there. The less bonkers stuff about possible marriage breakdown that they're seeking to repair and no one's going to make any public appearances until they have. Or more likely, I suspect, some sort of medical issue that has rendered her very, very reluctant to be photographed in public by other photographers. They've all been adjudged preferable to the truth. And that's the bit where it gets interesting. The idea that they're looking at the madness that's now unfolding to the point where they've lost the Daily Mail. And they're saying, no, this is all still better than actually telling the truth. All of this craziness is preferable to us, I don't know, going and cutting a ribbon later today or just appearing in public, doing a scheduled photo shoot. And of course, if the truth is simply that she is recuperating from a serious medical procedure and can't do any of the things that seem to me to be fairly straightforward, then the obvious case is that is what they should say. There's a degree of privacy that needs to be respected, although obviously the same people who would call today for the privacy to be respected were telling Harry and Meghan not long ago that the price they pay for their celebrity, the price they pay for their public status, the price they pay for their royal accoutrements is a complete surrendering of privacy. But you can't expect the Daily Mail columnists and royal correspondents to be consistent in their commentary. You don't get any privacy at all if you're a member of the royal family, brackets called Meghan, close brackets. You should get all the privacy you need if you're a member of the family, brackets called Kate, close brackets. But they have made a calculation that this is preferable. It's preferable to have all the speculation going on, all of the conspiracies, all of the unhappiness, to lose the support of the Daily Mail. It's preferable to actually telling the British public what is really going on. And that I thought was interesting. And it is interesting. But I can't move on. I can't move on, not when people are hurting. Not when the story is getting absolutely misconstrued to be kind, misreported to be less kind. When the Frank Hester, when the right-wing media, when the client journalists who populate every paper from the Times and the Telegraph down to the Sun, and many of their friends in broadcast as well, when they are all either implicitly or explicitly conspiring in the con that what this man has done is A, excusable, and B, has been apologised for, we are left with, we're left with a pretty grim vista that it would be wrong at this point to abandon. So where do you want to go next? Shall we follow the money? Shall we do what Jerry Maguire was exhorted to do so often by Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character? Shall we show me the money? Show me the money, Jerry. Show me the money. I think we'll do it straight. 10 million quid on the table. Why won't they give it back? 0345 6060 973. Just tell me why. Any angle you want on this, tell me why. Because I can't believe they need it. I can't believe they wouldn't be able to raise 10 million quid by making a few phone calls. Obviously, Michelle Mone and her husband would be less likely to come forward at this point in proceedings. But, I mean, what is 10 million quid to these people? The JCB bloke, is he still too busy keeping Boris Johnson in clover? I don't know, but they must be able to make a few calls. I'm not having my breakfast live on air, Matty. I am having a few sips of water in order to deal with the last vestiges of a tickly throat. But thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your concern. I want to know why you think they're not giving the money back, because that's what you do now. It's probably too late. But that's what you do, right? Crikey, this has blown up a bit. We probably should have seen it. Where's our Women Inequalities Minister? Why didn't she tell us what a big deal and how important this story was? I can't believe it's not going away. It's going to come up at PMQs later. And why don't we just give the money back and tell him to sling his hook? We could we even say we can't give back the last 5 million because we've already spent it? But the 5 million he's given this year, it's only March. We can send that back to him immediately. And this means that we can extend the conversation beyond those who are in the sights of people like Frank Hester when they make comments about wanting to hate all black women, and encompass everybody who's part of the body politic, everybody who will have a vote in the next general election, and working on the presumption that the votes they're fighting over, the ones that would be tempted by the jingoism, the xenophobia, the racism of the parties even further to the right than the Tories now, leaving those people out of the equation, but not necessarily out of the conversation, why would they not just give the money back? Sorry, we can't take this. If we'd known that you wanted Diane Abbott to be shot, we never would have taken your money in the first place. Because they've gone even further than not giving it back. I suppose they have to. One of them was on the radio this morning with Tom Swarbrick, saying that they would take, I think it was Tom Swarbrick or Will Frost at Sky News, one or the other, saying that they'd take another 10 million. If they gave you another 10 million, would you take it? Yeah. That's extraordinary, isn't it? So why? Why haven't they given it back? And if you can, then feel free to move on to the question of how on earth can they be saying in public that they'd take another 10 million quid off the massive racist? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Just to close the conversation that we kicked off at 10 o'clock this morning, and also to spare you from even more of my pontifications, let's hear from Quincy quickly before the next break in Tunbridge Wells. Quincy, what did you want to say?
Hi, James. Sorry, I called before.
I know, that's good.
I just want to say, I'm a man of colour with daughters of colour. And this is a bit of deja vu for me, because this brings me back to another incident here in this country where, I don't know if you know the story of Superintendent Robin Williams, who received a video from her sister saying, get rid of a certain monster, get him off the streets.
Yes, I do.
Robin Williams was also one of the founding members of the Black Policemen's Association. And she was hounded. She was prosecuted, but she had the prosecution overturned eventually. But she was prosecuted, convicted, made to register as a sex offender because she had received a video telling her to get this monster off the street, a video she hadn't even opened. I don't know what we're actually saying, and I don't know what I'm saying today to my daughters, because it sounds like Mr. Eston is saying the lives of black women doesn't matter.
So your contention is that had Superintendent Williams been a white police officer, she would not have been pursued with the alacrity and venom, perhaps, that she was pursued with.
Yes, that's right. That's part one. The other part is I would like to see black mothers really up in arms over both Superintendent Robin Williams' prosecution and this particular. This is saying what Mr. Heston is saying is black women. He's not saying a black woman.
No, he's not.
Black women. Black women should be shot. What do I tell my daughters? If you rise up in public office in this country, keep your head down, because there's still people in this country that think they're on a plantation and chasing after pickaninnies. What exactly should I tell my daughters today? What should I say to them? And as far as Ms. Badenoch is concerned, returning to the plantation, Ms. Badenoch only reminds me of a particular type of person living on the plantation. We had the field Negroes and we had the people living in the house with massa, right? And that's where she is in my mind. If you can't say black lives, all lives matters, black women, like everybody else, lives matter. How dare you? How dare you? Who do you think you are? I've got daughters in this country, right?
I hear you.
I've got black daughters in this. I've got daughters in this country, mate. How dare you? How dare you? No. We need our sisters in this country to stand up. We needed them to stand up with Superintendent Williams. We need them to stand up with people like Joe Cox, who said we have more that unites us than divides us, that get murdered for saying it, for saying that.
I hear you, Quincy.
5 4 inches tall, she gets stabbed 17 times and shot twice in the face for saying we have more that unites us than divides us. After leaving her children that morning, mommy's going to come back home to you. I know this clown and the supporting clowns are saying that our lives don't matter.
That's what you're hearing, and the idea that he has apologised for being rude, I think, possibly explains your sense of
women, not woman.
Yeah,
woman.
No, I hear you, but I'm going beyond indignation. You've gone somewhere deeper, Quincy. You've gone somewhere much more emotional than I could ever go, and than previous callers have gone, because you're looking at ramifications and consequences through the lens of your daughter's existence, I think, aren't you?
Lives matter.
I respect that. I do. I obviously have to qualify slightly some of the references you made to Kemi Badenoch in the context of slavery and in the context of the slave trade. You have the right to hold those opinions, but they are references and allusions that are rightly considered to be deeply offensive, and I know that you have made those comments in authentic conscience, but it's obviously not something I could ever in a million years say or endorse on the programme. I hope you understand that, Quincy.
I wish I could endorse you.
It's 11:18. You stay safe, mate. 21 minutes after 11. You can't step back from the emotional impact. I think if there was any doubt about that before Quincy came on the programme, Quincy comprehensively removed it. But you can, I think, focus on a slightly different question now, which is why don't they just give the money back? It can't just be that they can't afford to. It's a little glib, and Natasha reminded us yesterday the rules are probably quite complicated. Just because Jeremy Hunt managed to donate £100,000 to the Jeremy Hunt re-election campaign last week doesn't necessarily mean that Rishi Sunak is allowed to donate £10 million to the Conservative Party re-election campaign. He could probably donate it to the Rishi Sunak re-election campaign in Richmond, North Yorkshire, but I don't think he could just write a cheque for the party of which he is the leader. But, you know, his wife could. His father-in-law could ring his father-in-law. Say, hi, Dad. All right, Popsicle. Any chance you could free up 10 million quid? One of our... And also, you know, his father-in-law's Indian, so he could say one of our donors has turned out to be a massive racist. He was making jokes about Indians climbing onto train roofs in a crowded room not long ago. Leaving aside... Look, we'll have to wait till I see you. I have to wait till I see you next time to talk about why we took money off him in the first place. Any chance you could make up the shortfall, Pops? Any chance you could make up the shortfall? 10 million quid. I mean, that'd be quite a class act, would it? I don't know. Maybe I'm going completely bonkers. I turn around and say one of the great advantages of having a prime minister whose father-in-law is a billionaire is that when it turns out that you've accidentally taken £10 million off a massive racist, you can find out your father-in-law and get him to plug the gap while telling the billionaire, while telling the massive racist to jog on, to sling his hook. So why won't they give the money back? Dave's in Cambridge. Dave, what's going on?
I think 10 million is a bit of chump change to Rishi. It's probably something he has in his back pocket. But I think the reason why they don't want to give it back is because it kind of confirms what everyone's thinking, is that they are institutionally racist.
Does it?
But also, yeah, I think it does. I think we're way past speculation and debate. I think their actions are very
so this is
self-evident.
If they give the money back, then all of the he's apologised, he doesn't really mean it, he's not actually a racist because he said it where he didn't think it would be reported. If he was a racist, he'd have obviously said it somewhere where it would have been reported. All of these pathetic defences fall apart.
No, I think he's just, you know, they're trying to cover every aspect. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. If they give it back, you know, it just shows that, you know, that they admit that this guy is an abject bigot, and therefore his conduct becomes... Yeah, but why is that a problem? I don't think this quite follows through, Dave, actually. You give it back, you disassociate yourself from the suspicions that you describe. You don't endorse them by giving it back, you endorse them by keeping it. Yeah, I understand, but it's too late when they give it back. When did it become too late? I don't think it is too late. I would give them until whatever time it was yesterday that Kemi Badenoch came out with her mealy-mouthed and quite offensive apology. The offence lying largely in her decision not to call Diane Abbott, but to give her the most dehumanising moniker she could, to go in with the lines that head teachers and prison officers use, just to use her surname alone. But it was interesting. I always start the clock at 1 o'clock to see whether or not, when I come off air, to see whether or not the story's going to move on before I come on air tomorrow. And I don't know that this one will. I thought it would yesterday, but she's done it twice now, Kemi Badenoch. She's done it twice now. She did it. I think she did it on Lee Anderson, didn't she? But she made it impossible for Rishi Sunak to stay silent yesterday. She made it impossible for that holding tactic to hold. But why they wouldn't give the money? I don't think I agree with Dave. You may 0345 6060 973. But the idea that you would be proving all of your critics right by giving the money back, I'm not sure stands up to scrutiny. AJ's in Wokingham. AJ, what do you think?
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for giving this topic the air. I think I'm a British Asian, and I know you've had kind of a mix of people phoning in, but I think what you're doing is, it gave me goosebumps. Listen to Quincy just a moment ago. Oh my gosh, I was almost in tears myself, and I can't understand how a black female would feel either. No. But trying to answer your question about why is it, I think it's a bigger picture here. I think it's not just about Hester donating money. They've got a potential election coming up. I think it's greed. I think they've crossed the line, a moral line here, for somebody who has voted for the Conservatives, who look to Rishi Sunak as an Asian, going, "Wow, we've got a role model here." They've crossed the line. Give them money back. They can make it happen. I'm fuming at the moment. I'm just. They've just crossed the line here for me. And
they have, but I'm still not getting the. It can't just be greed. If anyone can raise 10 million quid by making a few phone calls, it's the Conservative Party. They could just start with the people that got PPE contracts. They'd have it sorted by by the end of the next news bulletin. By the time Thomas Watts hangs his headphones up at 11:33, they could have got 10 million quid in the bank just from PPE contract recipients alone. Surely.
Okay, is it bigger than that in terms of the bit of a boys' network in terms of who else is funding? If he sends that money back, who else is he going to be impacting? Who else is he appealing to at the moment? I think you touched on it as well. The kind of audience that they're trying to appeal to at the moment, and both Suella and Rishi. Oh my gosh, have you take a look in the mirror?
You give the message to other donors who may have skeletons in their closet that if you get caught, then we will throw you under the bus. So what's the point of me giving 10 million quid to the Tories in the hope of getting a peerage? And by the way, if I'd already got my peerage, they wouldn't be able to take it away from me now. This Hester character has an OBE. That's in the bag. I'm sure that was for, helping little old ladies over the road rather than making massive donations to the Tory party. But the message you send to other future donors who are all in it either to get richer or to get baubles, I can't think of any other reason why you'd make a donation to the Tory party. The message is, well, look, even if you keep the receipt, we reserve the right to tell you to sling your hook if it turns out that you've done some stuff that the press gets hold of in the future. Maybe. I mean, we are in the realms of speculation, AJ, just like the hashtag Kate-spiracy, which was the only other contender for our second hour of conversation today. Interesting what you say about being a former and potential Tory voter, and also as a British Asian, seeing Rishi Sunak as someone who may be a force for good. I don't think many people would argue that he has lived up to that promise, that early promise. David is in Nantwich. David, why won't they give the money back? Or why won't they just give it to someone else? They could give it to a charity. They could give it to anyone. They could give it to Diane Abbott.
I think they're just corrupt grifters, to be honest with you, James.
Well, that's a simplistic analysis, but possibly a fair one.
And at the moment, I think they're gearing up for a May election. What's the spend gone up on Facebook ads? Is it about 1,200% or something?
It is. I'm always slightly wary of percentages in these contexts because I don't know what the figure was to start with. If it's gone from 50p to 50 quid, it's a huge...
Absolutely, yeah.
But you take,
exactly.
Yes.
But no, I just think they're corrupt. And also, I don't think they know how unpopular they are. I think in their own minds, they think they're still doing the right thing, and it's the will of the people. We're doing what the people want. Obviously 30.
Oh, I lost that. It's gone. And it's not your fault. The phone line's failed us, but you made your point, and it means I'm going to hit the news on time for possibly the first time ever. Here's Thomas Watts with your headlines. PMQ's on the way at 12. Tricky one for Keir Starmer. What's he going to go in with? What's he going to start with? I normally caveat any predictions of what Keir Starmer is going to do at PMQs with the observation that he plays a slightly different game to some of his predecessors. He doesn't always go with the most obviously advantageous party political point scoring. He will sometimes go dry. He will sometimes go in on an issue of political principle or very specific policy that we perhaps weren't expecting. But he gets all of them today because this is a point of principle. Taking £10 million off someone who turns out to be a massive racist and then not giving it back, not disassociating yourselves from them, is a very conscious and deliberate step. I don't know how significant this is, and I don't know what's happened on other shows, but we have been talking about, we will by the time Natasha gets here to queue up PMQs, we'd have been talking about this for 4 hours now. And we haven't had a single call from anybody seeking to defend either Frank Hester or indeed the Tory party's response. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that since I got proved right about everything regarding Brexit, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump and all the rest of it, those people tend not to ring me anymore. And you're right, sadly. I'm constantly trying. I'm embarked upon a never-ending quest to woo them back. They won't even need to apologise, but it's quite significant that. And Idiot's Corner is I mean, too idiotic even to read it. It's possible. I never even realised this until yesterday. You can be too idiotic even for Idiot's Corner. There's a level of idiocy that makes me think you're either desperately trying to get into Idiot's Corner because it's the only time today that anybody's going to acknowledge you exist, or this has been put together by AI. This is just unbelievably awful. And so there it is. It is absolutely indefensible. So although there's almost certainly a Daily Mail article in the offing about how millions of people agree with Frank Hester but are too afraid to say so. They've been cowed by the woke mob. They've been silenced by political correctness. Everybody knows that what Frank Hester said was true. Loads of people want to see Diane Abbott shot. Everybody sees her on the television and wants to hate all black women. But you're not allowed to say so in this country anymore without being called a racist. Apologies to the magnificent Stuart Lee, who I paraphrased very clumsily there. But there is probably a Spectator, one of Andrew Neil's house elves at the Spectator has probably pitched the article about the public immolation of Frank Hester proves that this country has gone to the dogs. You can't say what you want anymore in this country. So that'll be out there. But I can usually find a couple of people possessed of that sort of outlook on either my switchboard or my inbox, but not today. Make of that what you will. I don't read too much into it. For a start, it's anecdotal, but it is true. And we turn next, or we return now to the question of why wouldn't they just give the money back? I don't see what they lose, apart from 10 million quid. I don't see what they lose by giving the money back. Do you? David's in Jarrow. David, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, David.
I think in your last monologue, you've pretty much just stitched most of my points that I wanted to make.
That's because I listened. I put you on pause. I listened to what you said, and then I passed it all off as my own.
Oh, well, that obviously sounds about right. I think the only thing that we're missing is by not completely disassociating themselves. I've just finished night shift as well, so I'm a little bit tired. By not completely disassociating themselves with the massive racists.
Yes.
They can allow themselves to play both sides of the optics.
Yeah.
Obviously, we did say it was wrong. We did appear that it was racist. So obviously, we are not a racist people. Of course, we're not. We said it was racist. That's all the thing. But by the other ways, we're not going to give them the money back because that means we completely disagree with them when we want to disassociate with that side, and we don't want you reporting us.
I think this is a misjudgment. I mean, leaving aside reverb and the fear of hemorrhaging voters to them. I don't think there is a huge constituency of people who would think if they gave the money, if they said we don't want this money, people would think, well, you're not my party anymore. I don't see how they lose votes.
Well, on this one issue, you could be right. But if you stitch all of the other issues of all of jingoism and all of your immigration issues together with the one of being a patriot and we are the people of the ones who are going to make you say what you could say in your country, we did going to say it's completely wrong and disassociate. But we will keep the money and we will say he's wrong and keep him as a friend.
So we have the sort of the lingering beery belch of 30p Lee in our nostrils at the moment, don't we? Where
unfortunately
the calculation is that actually people agree with it. I mean, you can't agree with Lee Anderson without being Islamophobic. You literally can't. It's like all forms of racism. Islamophobia is a racist lie, and what he said about Sadiq Khan was a racist lie. So really, we're back to Donald Trump territory. Fear of losing the support of racist liars.
Basically.
And I guess...
And I wouldn't go as far as to say all of them are completely racist liars that you'd be losing support of, but there's a lot of people on the kind of fringe where they think that the country's broken. It's broken because of people who've come here or because of the different brown faces they see at the checkout or the people that you don't hear the language that they're speaking on the trains. Like I say, I wouldn't put it down to just the one comment of Heston. Yeah. I would put it not wanting to disassociate with anybody who thought, well, I don't think that was that bad of a thing to say. And I don't think logically that a lot of people would go through all of the steps from thinking that, from saying that Diane Abbott should be shot to thinking all black women should be shot. I'm not sure how many people have actually followed the logic through as to what he actually said in his words to the final point and just took it, well, if I don't like
you're right.
Shot, I wouldn't say that I'm racist, but I don't think because she's black. I just think she should be shot.
Yeah, because I don't like her. And I don't really mean it. No one actually wants to shoot her, but so therefore you should be allowed to say it out loud. Oh, and that person over there from a different political party, he should go to prison for having a curry. But I mean, double standards aside, you're right. Sometimes I go a little bit far, so it's not 100% signing up to every single point on the Bible of bigotry. It is just thinking, well, they're my party. They're not supposed to be punishing people for saying stuff that we say down the golf club or saying stuff that we say in private. Obviously, you shouldn't say it. It's bad that he got caught, but hey-ho, behind closed doors. It just sends a message, perhaps, of intolerance to people who expect their intolerance to be tolerated, and all that off the back of a night shift. Absolutely first-class performance from David. 11:41 is the time. And speaking of that vote, they're boasting today that 30p Lee's infection to Reverb has reclaim. What are they called? Reverb? No. Reflux. 30p Lee's defection to Reflux has caused a huge influx of new members of Farage and Tice's party. It's not reflux. What is it? It is reflux. Reform. So what do you think constitutes a huge result? 30p Lee defecting to Reform has prompted such an avalanche of support for them that they have signed up. How many new members do you think? 1 million? 100,000? Or 1,000? What do you think they're boasting about today? 1 million new members? 100,000 new members? Or 1,000 new members? Newly signed up members. Well, they're not really members, are they? I think they're just donors, because it's not it's a limited company rather. So presumably they've just sent a cheque, have they? Anyway, how many cheques did they get? 1 million cheques? 100,000 cheques? Or 1,000 cheques? I shall tell you shortly. The time now is 11:42. I must write that name on a post-it note, mustn't I? I can't keep getting it wrong. What's the one that's the lad from Lewis that wasn't Lewis? What's his outfit called? Is that Reflux? Relent? No? I give up. John's in Stroud. John, why won't they give the money back? Give them the money back. Give the money back. Show me the money. Why won't they give it back?
I think there's one possible reason is that they're afraid that if he gives the money back, he'll give it to somebody else.
Yes.
And, I know it might be a bit of a stretch. Well, it might be a bit of a stretch to suggest that a party that has Lee Anderson as its only MP would take money off a massive racist. But, it's possible.
Well, let's not go there, John, honestly. Flipping out. Talk about putting two and two together and coming out with 73.
I know. It's a complete logical leap there. But, I think it's plausible, and
it depends how petulant Frank Hester is, doesn't it? In a way.
How petulant do you think he might be?
I don't know. How petulant do you think he might be?
I think the sort of person who will say things like, that woman should be shot.
Yeah, might be quite petulant.
It might be.
Do you know what? Although, having said that, obviously neither of us have ever met him. Therefore, we can say with certainty that he's not petulant. That's what we'd be doing now if we were Conservative ministers. Obviously, I've never met him, but I don't think we can conclude that he's petulant because of something that he said in a room full of people on his own payroll. As a Conservative minister, both John and I are confident that he is not petulant because we've never met him. That seemed to be the logic of Kevin Hollinrake this morning.
Absolutely. He is wrong, but we cannot say that he's petulant.
All right, well, that might be it. And that would all depend on their fears of what he'd do with it. And they may even have asked him. No, they wouldn't have asked him. I wonder if they've spoken to him. Do you think that the phones are ringing? So all the people that he used to ring up when he was making donations. This was quite interesting when Johnson was getting his apartment decorated by someone who he forgot had paid to decorate his apartment. You remember that? The phones ring. So usually it'd be like, hi, yay. Yeah, I just hit my headphones with my phone then. Why am I actually using a phone to do this? Little role play. I'm on, YouTube. Hi, lads. Hello. Big shout out to the YouTube viewers. Okay, so I've got my phone now. Hang on. Ring. Frankie, baby. Frankie, yeah, come to the big ball, white tight. You can come how you want. Come in your ripped jeans. You look great in a pair of loafers. Yes, absolutely. So every time he rings that number, normally, Frank Hester, it gets picked up quicker than bookies. But now he's ringing them. Why are they answering the phone? I go to leaving another. Hello, yes, Frank again. Could someone please just call me back? Could someone please just call me back? I've given you. Why is no one returning my calls? Why is no one returning my call? I dread to think what sort of messages he might be leaving on people's voicemails at the moment. But that, of course, would be proof of nothing, as long as he subsequently apologised. It's 10 to 12. I got some cooking advice for you now. I just shared a recipe with my colleagues, and I could tell by their reaction that something had gone a little bit wrong. So I went out to Borough Market. If you're ever in London and you get the chance to go to Borough Market, try not to go on a Saturday or a Sunday. It's absolutely rammed. But if you can, I mean, it's a really lovely visit. It's one of those, the bits of London I like most are the bits of any city I like most, but London's home, are the bits where if you squint a bit, it probably looks the same as it did 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And the further east you go from the centre, from the West End, the further east you go, the truer that gets in many ways. So if you get into the temples down by the embankment area, you get into the inner temples, and it's absolutely magical. I told you about the time I found a chapel on the first floor of a building. Anyway, I digress. We went to Borough Market and went for tapas at a place called Brindisa, which is a fantastic restaurant. And I was just telling the team how delicious, unexpectedly delicious one of the things we ordered was. I said we had char-grilled midget gems with like a really spicy sauce. And they're both looking at me as if and I'm thinking, I know that char-grilling a lettuce is a slightly new thing for many of us. I'd never seen a char-grilled lettuce before. But why are they looking at me? It's not that weird to char-grill midget gems. So what I'm telling you, this is very important culinary advice. When reading recipes, do not get midget gems mixed up with little gems. So little gem is a lettuce, isn't it? You get a little gem lettuce, a char-grilled. So don't char-grill midget gems, just ever. I mean, there's no need, is there? Are they the tiny wine gums, midget gems? They're not Dolly Mix. Dolly Mix just got the... Yeah, so anyway... Char-grilled little gems, delicious, with some sort of sprinkle on it. I don't know what was in it. It was amazing. Char-grilled midget gems, no, don't go there. No need. No need ever. And that is the end of today's Recipe Corner. 11:52 is the time. Back to the question of why won't they just give the £10 million back to Frank Hester, the bloke who wants Diane Abbott to be shot and finds it very hard not to hate all black women whenever a black woman called Diane Abbott appears on the television, but is categorically not referring to either her gender or her race when he says that as a black woman she makes him want to hate all black women. How bizarre. Ian's been in touch. Reflux new followers reminder, James. Thank you, Ian. At least somebody is paying attention. How many new followers do you think 30p Lee has tempted to sign up for the reflux party? Is it A, 1 million? Is it B, 100,000? Or is it C, they are boasting about signing up a whole 1,000? There's probably 1,000 people that have turned this radio programme off since I started talking about lettuce. So it can't be that, can it? Can it? Yes, it can. That's what they're boasting about. The idea that the arrival of 1,000 new subscribers. What do you call people signing up to something that's not really a political party but is a business? That anyway, I'll call them customers. 1,000 new customers for the reflux party. Back to Daniel on the Isle of Wight. Why won't they give the money back, Daniel?
Hi, James. I think it's because they're scared. I think if they weren't scared about the election before, they are now. Somewhere in the Conservative headquarters, they've got a little spreadsheet only 5 people can see with what they actually think is going to happen at the next election.
That's true.
And I think one of your previous callers kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I think they're looking at it, and even if there's a 20%, 30% chance that they push that money back, and I'm not quite jaded enough to say that all Tory voters are racist quite yet.
No, don't go there.
No, that's what I mean.
I know.
So, but if a certain percentage goes, actually, I'm not welcome here anymore, then there's a chance, it might be a small chance, but they're looking at their numbers, and not only are Labour in the driving seat in town, but the Conservatives aren't even the opposition anymore.
Yeah.
So they are going to do anything they possibly can to stop this tide of people using the Tories.
That means that there is a constituency of voters in their minds, if not on their spreadsheets, and this is where the sort of beery breath of 30p Lee appears over our shoulder, who would actually see themselves as being on the same side of this scandal as the bloke that said he wanted Diane Abbott to be shot, or does it? Am I slightly misunderstanding you?
The problem is that none of it's black and white like that anymore.
No.
If you look at the Tory party, there's 3, 4, 5 different versions of the Tory party at the moment.
Yes.
And they all go in little gradations from one extreme to another. So, you don't need to be totally 100% behind what he said, but you just need to be able to think that he should have the right to say that.
Okay, yeah, there's probably several things going on, including the fact, as John's just texted using capital letters, James, it's easy. It's £10 million. So, the hole it would leave in their finances is part of it, probably. But the other part of it is, well, we may not know for sure, but look at the kind of voters that we've been wooing recently. This is the kind of thing that might put them off.
Yeah, and like I say, there only needs to be a slight chance that they see themselves sitting next to the SNP. The very slightest chance.
You mean,
and they will do anything they can
the third party in the House of Commons, which some polling does indeed. You can extrapolate that from some of the polling. Did we get Sunak from Friday night? I think let's just play that as a little reminder of what an absolute catastrophe he has proved to be as Prime Minister.
We are a country where we love our neighbours and we are building Britain together. But I fear that our great achievement in building the world's most successful multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy is being deliberately undermined. There are forces here at home trying to tear us apart.
They certainly are, and they've given 10 million quid to your party, mate, so why won't you give it back? I need to do something, Ryan tells me, although I'm not sure he is speaking from a position of authority on this, but apparently if you're going to become a big deal on YouTube, you have to do this. Let me get this right. Hi YouTubers, if you're enjoying this, then please like, share and subscribe, and be sure to ring that bell. Is that what you do for YouTube? Is that no? Has Ryan made that up? Has he made me look stupid? Hey, you don't want to miss any of LBC's sweet content. No? Oh, right. I haven't got a bell, no. Should I need a bell? Am I supposed to have a bell? Is it not? PMQs can't come soon enough. Luke's in Weybridge. Luke, briefly, if you would, why won't they give the money back?
I think this just illustrates the extent to which money influences our government. And
well, you're not going to win any prizes for that, mate, are you?
No, but the point is, there's a lot of emotion on the surface of this, but if you look deeper, it just talks to how fundamentally broken it is.
Yeah, it does.
Why should this individual get to give £10 million at all?
Well, he wants a peerage.
But it shouldn't be allowed.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. Well, I mean, you can give your money to a political party if you want, but not if you've made 10 million quid's profit out of contracts that the government gave you. You're just giving it back.
Well, I think we should cap the amount of money that's given to political parties by individuals.
How would that work? I wonder. I don't think I disagree with you, but I think there are some reservations, aren't there? No, there aren't. No, cap the amount you as an individual can give. I suppose you could give it with you could spread it out, get your wife to give some, get the kids to give some, but it would all look a bit 10 million quid, one person. Luke, I did warn you to be brief because PMQs is almost upon us and Natasha Clark is here. What are we thinking, Natasha?
Well, we are surprised sometimes by Sir Keir Starmer. He sometimes doesn't go on the obvious own goal, does he? But obviously this is really all it's been talked about in Westminster for the past 48 hours. If you don't talk about Lee Anderson on Monday as well, which feels like a very long time ago now, but I guess he could go on a combination of those two things. Lee Anderson, reform, the mess of a press conference that we witnessed on Monday. And also, I think if I were Keir, I would be going on, are you in charge of your party or is the business secretary? Because it appears that tweet from Kemi Badenoch was the thing that bounced him into action yesterday, doesn't it?
And she's done that before.
She did do that.
Did she do it before?
Believe it was over the post office scandal, wasn't it? Where she weighed in over not Martin Stanford.
You always call him Martin Stanford. He's our colleague on LBC News.
It's not Martin. Sorry.
Weird. This.
What was his name?
Who?
The post office man that went up against the committee.
God.
Sorry, I've literally had a brain blank.
It's contagious.
The man that went up against.
If you hadn't said Martin, I'd know.
Who is it? Kevin? Is it Kevin?
No, that's the minister. That's Kevin Hollinrake.
I'm sorry, I'm having a complete brain fart today.
I'm just pretending not to know because I'm enjoying your discomfort.
It's not very funny.
No, I'm not really. I've forgotten as well.
Okay, anyway, the post office chief that was accused by Kemi Badenoch of bullying a few weeks ago and that went up in front of committee and claimed to have proof that he was told to sit on those post office payments until after the election. She weighed in very, very firmly on Twitter, which meant that the government... Go on.
Henry Staunton.
That's literally nothing. That's nothing to do with what I said, is it? Staunton, Stanford.
So that's where it's gone, Natasha.
Yeah.
You've got Staunton and Stanford in your mind are now interchangeable. And as soon as you go down the Stanford route, up pops Martin.
Maybe I'm dyslexic or something. I didn't know.
Nothing to do with that.
But yes, so she's weighed in on Twitter already. She makes running the government even more difficult for the Prime Minister.
Deliberately?
I mean...
Yes.
You can't argue that you didn't know what the number 10 line was yesterday, right? So she weighed in. She knew exactly what she was doing when she did. And, after pressure from people like us asking what on earth the Minister for Equalities thinks about this situation, eventually stood out about it.
Forgive me. If he doesn't go in on that, what does he go in on?
No, I think he probably will.
He has to, really, doesn't he?
I think he probably will. And like I say, maybe he just goes in on a general Rishi Sunak weakness.
What does Sunak come back with? Does he point out that Diane Abbott is not currently a member of the Labour Party, or would that make him...
He could point out that Diane Abbott...
Because they'll have gamed this.
Yeah, was suspended from the Labour Party and has not had the whip taken back. And
I think she withdrew herself from the inquiry because she didn't have faith in it. So there's not a lot of mileage there.
The inquiry into herself.
The investigation, like to decide whether or not she gets the whip back, if memory serves.
I'm not sure about that, but
we've both got holes in our memories today. But I don't see where the
well.
mileage is. It's a bit like raising the ghost of Jeremy Corbyn. But what does it prove? That she's not on Labour benches anymore. It doesn't make what Frank Hester said any less racist or misogynistic.
No, it doesn't. And, we've had the pressure from the Conservative Mayor, Andy Street, the Mayor for the West Midlands as well.
He's got a tricky
today.
Election on the horizon, of course.
He does, but obviously he's not a man. He's a man that speaks his mind.
Yes, he is.
And today he has said that the Conservative Party should pay that money back. And you've also got the question of, well, would you take money going forward, which was asked of the Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, on the morning round. If you don't want to hand the money back, that is a fair argument to make. But would you take more money from him going forward?
Yeah. Does he have to say that? I'm just trying to think what I would have done in the same. So, well, now you don't understand how hard it is. It would be like trying to get the eggs out of a baked cake, taking that £10 million out of the party machine. So spent. Yes, exactly that. We haven't kept the receipts we've got. It's all going on Facebook adverts. Your Auntie Doris will wonder what's... Would you take another 10? Oh, no, of course not.
Exactly.
No, not now we've seen the colour of his eyes.
Sure, and I think that's exactly why the Conservative Party and the government didn't want to get into this row about what or what was not racist, because they didn't want to answer these questions on what happens next with this absolutely huge donation that they cannot afford to pay back.
Well, I don't know. I received considerable support from people listening to the programme when I expressed unhappiness about this. The idea that when Badenoch published her statement on it, she referred to Diane Abbott as Abbot. Now, nothing wrong with referring to politicians by their surname. I do it all the time. I just did it then to Kemi Badenoch. But not in this context. When you're saying, someone has been threatened with death by a donor and you adopt the approach of a prison officer or a school teacher, I thought that was unpleasant, unkind.
I think you and I get a lot of stick when we call politicians by their first names, don't we? And I appreciate your point that this is obviously a much more sensitive situation. Maybe she ran out of characters in her tweet.
Well, you know that she didn't, because we've counted them, and that's also the reason why she did it in 2 tweets. Well, if you had a tick, have you got a tick yet?
Yeah, I don't have a tick, but I've paid for my Twitter subscription, so I can do a long tweet.
Why haven't you got a tick? You're part of LBC's crack team of political... Well, you're the leader of LBC's crack team.
They took them all away about, a year ago.
Outrageous.
I blame Elon Musk for that one.
This is the point in proceedings where I remind you that any minute now we will cross live to the House of Commons when Sir Keir Starmer... Oh, look at that, as if by magic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the legislation on the post office scandal? Mr. Speaker, this week we lost the formidable Tommy McAvoy. He served his hometown of Rutherglen and the Labour government with loyalty and good humour, and we send our deepest sympathies to his wife, Eleanor, and their family. We also learned that the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead will be taking her well-deserved retirement. She has served this House and her constituents with a real sense of duty, and her unwavering commitment to ending modern slavery is commended by all of us. We thank her for her service. Is the Prime Minister proud to be bankrolled by someone using racist and misogynist language when he says the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington makes you want to hate all black women?
Mr. Speaker, the alleged comments were wrong, they were racist, and he has now, as I said, the comments were wrong, they were racist. He has rightly apologised for them, and that remorse should be accepted, Mr. Speaker. There is no place for racism in Britain, and the government that I lead is living proof of that.
Mr. Speaker, the man bankrolling the Prime Minister also said that the member for Hackney North should be shot. How low would he have to sink? What racist, woman-hating threat of violence would he have to make before the Prime Minister plucked up the courage to hand back the £10 million that he's taken from him?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the gentleman apologised genuinely for his comments, and that remorse should be accepted. But he talks about language. He might want to reflect on the double standards of his deputy leader, calling her opponents scum, Mr. Speaker. His shadow foreign secretary, the shadow foreign secretary, comparing Conservatives to Nazis, Mr. Speaker, and the man that he wanted to make Chancellor. The man that he wanted to make Chancellor talking about lynching a female minister. His silence on that speaks volumes.
Mr. Speaker, the difference is he's scared of his party. I've changed my party. And Mr. Speaker,
I want to see both the Prime Minister and lead the opposition. Here's some.
2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister invited himself into everyone's living room at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. No one asked him to give that speech. He chose to do it. He chose to anoint himself as the great healer and pose as some kind of unifier. But when the man bankrolling his election says the member for Hackney North should be shot, he suddenly finds himself tongue-tied, shrinking in sophistry, hoping he can deflect for long enough that we'll all go away. What does the Prime Minister think it was about the hundreds of millions of pounds of NHS contracts given to Frank Hester by his government that first attracted him to giving £10 million to the Tory party in the first place?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely not going to take any lectures from somebody who chose to represent an anti-Semitic terrorist group, Hizb ut-Tahrir, who chose to serve a leader who let anti-Semitism run rife in this Labour Party. Those are his actions, those are his values, and that's how he should be judged.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is he's describing a Labour Party that no longer exists. I'm describing the man who is bankrolling their upcoming general election.
Keir Starmer.
They can shout all they like. 2 weeks ago, he marched them out like fools to defend Islamophobia, and now the member for Ashfield is warming up the opposition benches for them. And yesterday he sent them out to play down racism and misogyny until he was forced to change course. He won't hand the money back. He won't comment on how convenient it is that a man handed huge NHS contracts by his government is now his party's biggest donor. You have to wonder what the point is of a Prime Minister who can't lead and a party that can't govern. And Mr. Speaker, national insurance contributions fund state pensions and the NHS. So is the Prime Minister's latest unfunded £46 billion promise to scrap national insurance going to be paid for by cuts to state pensions or cuts to the NHS?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad he's brought up the budget. It's about time that he spoke about his plans, because what have we heard, Mr. Speaker, from the Shadow Chief Secretary? The Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury confirmed.
Sorry. Shh. Prime Minister.
The Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury has confirmed that the Labour Party will not be sticking to the Conservative government spending plans. So we now have a litany of unfunded promises on the NHS, on mental health, on dentistry, on breakfast clubs, and that doesn't even include the £28 billion 2030 eco-pledge that he's still committed to. But what we all know, Mr. Speaker, is that while we're cutting taxes, Labour's unfunded promises mean higher taxes for working Britain.
No, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party will not be sticking to his completely unfunded £46 billion promise. And he thinks he can trick people into believing that, but simply shaking the Tory magic money tree will bring it into existence. Let's be clear. 80% of national insurance is spent on social security and pensions. 20% is spent on the NHS. So he's either cutting pensions or the NHS, or he will have to raise other taxes or borrowing. Which is it, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I know it's not a strong point, but if you actually listened to the Chancellor last week, what he would have seen is NHS spending is going up, Mr. Speaker. It's going up. It's a plan that's backed by the NHS CEO, who says that we're giving her what she needs, and at the same time, we are responsibly cutting taxes for millions of people in work. An average worker benefiting from a £900 tax cut, Mr. Speaker. But what I'm hearing for him is he's against our plans to cut national insurance.
The highest tax burden since the Second World War. I did listen to the Chancellor, £46 billion of unfunded commitments. They tried that under the last administration, and everybody else is paying the price. And 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister promised to crack down on those spreading hate. Today, he shrunk at the first challenge. Last week, he promised fantasy tax cuts. Now he's pretending it can all be paid for with no impact on pensions or the NHS. All we need now, Mr. Speaker, is an especially hardy lettuce, and it could be 2022 all over again. Is it any wonder that he's too scared to call an election when the public can see that the only way to protect their country, their pension and their NHS from the madness of this Tory party is by voting Labour?
Mr. Speaker, again...
No, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about pensions. Pensions are going up by around £900 in this year. It's this government that's protected the triple lock for the last 10 years. He talks about supporting working people. It's this government that's cutting taxes for every single person in work, Mr. Speaker. It's this government that's investing in the NHS, but all we have from him is a £28 billion unfunded promise. Mr. Speaker, I had a look at it. It's here. It's all here. Making Britain a clean energy superpower. He's still stuck to it, Mr. Speaker. And if you look through it carefully, there's billions in spending he's already committed to Scotland, billions for Wales. There's actually money for North London too, I noticed. But the problem is, none of it is funded. So why doesn't he come clean and tell him under his plans, Britain people's taxes are going up, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, millions of people around the UK and Europe have been inspired by the brilliance of Six Nations rugby. And Premier League clubs like Gloucester Rugby, which were funded during the pandemic through loans authorised by the Prime Minister as then Chancellor, have always been grateful for being kept solvent. But the Prime Minister will also know that the finances of some of these clubs are fragile and that the current loan repayment schemes could be crippling. So will my right honourable friend ask the Sports Minister and the Treasury to try and find a solution through this so that taxpayer interests are protected and all of us can go on being inspired by top-class rugby for years to come?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right that we stepped in with a £150 million financial lifeline to ensure the survival of Premiership Rugby League clubs during the pandemic. And I am told that DCMS is working with Sport England as the agent to talk to borrowers with concerns about their loan agreements, and any ones that do have concerns should contact Sport England in the normal way. But I can also proudly tell him that we are talking to the Rugby Football Union and the Premiership League to secure not just the future of rugby union, but also his local Gloucester Rugby.
We come to the leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to begin by wishing Ramadan Mubarak to Muslims across these aisles. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party have accepted a £10 million donation from an individual who has said that one of our parliamentary colleagues in this chamber should be shot. Why is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom putting money before morals?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the comments were wrong. The gentleman in question has apologised for them, and that remorse should be accepted.
Stephen Flynn.
This is complete rubbish. The gentleman in question apologised for being rude. He wasn't rude, he was racist, he was odious, and he was downright bloody dangerous. Now, on Monday, the number 10 said, we've seen an unacceptable rise in extremist activity which is seeking to divide our society and hijack our democratic institutions. Isn't it extremism that we should all be worried about? The views of those Tory donors that we've read about this week.
Prime Minister. No, Mr. Speaker, there has actually been a rise in extremist activity that is seeking to hijack our democratic institutions. It's important. It is important that we have the tools to tackle this threat. That's what the extremism strategy will do, and I would urge him to wait for the Community Secretary to release the details.
Will Quins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sub-postmasters across the country will welcome the government's announcement today on the introduction of legislation to overturn the convictions.
16 minutes after 12 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, joined for now by Natasha Clark, our political editor, with whom I will shortly be picking over the bones of what you've just heard. I always get distracted by Will Quince. Is that the name of the character in Midsummer Night's Dream? It's Peter Quince, isn't it? It's Peter Quince. That's it. Sorry. I should probably not have done that bit on air. 20 minutes after 12. Listen, I'm not putting you in Idiot's Corner. I'm going to read it out and then tell you why you're a bit silly, but not Idiot's Corner. So you fade out on a question about sub-postmasters. Is that not important enough for you, James? You want to pick over the bones of funding for rugby instead? Disgusting! Exclamation mark. No, and listen, it would be very conceited and unfair of me to presume that you listen to PMQs with me every week. If you did, you'd know that we always fade out after Stephen Flynn's questions have finished, and we have to listen to questions about things like funding for rugby because it is convention to take a question from a Conservative backbencher before they move to the leader of the SNP. So that's when we fade out. And the answer to the question about sub-postmasters was already known. The announcement came before PMQs even started about the new legislation coming in. So I would ask you to withdraw that disgusting, please, while we remind ourselves of one of the wonderful radio features that we dreamt up a few months ago and then completely forgot about.
Sneak here, sneak here, sneak here.
I must do another YouTube thing. Here is the latest smear kier in a very, very long line.
2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister invited himself into everyone's living room at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. No one asked him to give that speech. He chose to do it. He chose to anoint himself as the great healer and pose as some kind of unifier. But when the man bankrolling his election says the member for Hackney North should be shot, he suddenly finds himself tongue-tied, shrinking in sophistry, hoping he can deflect for long enough that we'll all go away. What does the Prime Minister think it was about the hundreds of millions of pounds of NHS contracts given to Frank Hester by his government that first attracted him to giving £10 million to the Tory party in the first place?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely not going to take any lectures from somebody am somebody who chose to represent an anti-Semitic terrorist group, Hizb ut-Tahrir.
I don't know whether that's libelous or not, but it's certainly smear Keir, because when Keir Starmer offered legal advice to the group in question, they were neither proscribed nor terrorists. And had they been obviously and avowedly anti-Semitic, they presumably would have been. So, if you don't think that that person over there or that group over there should have legal representation, then remember you are calling for a world in which you would not be automatically entitled to it either. But anyway, on the plus side, it was a nice opportunity to remind ourselves of that splendid Smear Keir jingle. Natasha Clark is with me. It did as expected, I think. But, for me at least, and looking at my inbox, Sunak's responses left quite a lot to be desired.
Yes, and obviously to start off the Prime Minister's questions by using Angela Rayner's description of Tories as scum in comparison to someone calling for a black woman to be shot.
Yes.
It's not the same, is it?
Well, it's not remotely the same.
Not anywhere near the same.
But oddly as well.
Good try, but I'm flabbergasted about why
aren't you?
He didn't try at least to talk about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, which is his usual go-to, and also would be a completely fair point to make. If you're talking about racism, which we do regularly day in, day out, we are talking about Islamophobia, and we also are talking about anti-Semitism, which is more prevalent in the Labour Party.
No one's given 10 million quid to the Labour Party and then called for... I can't think of any.
Didn't the ECHR once say the Labour Party were institutionally anti-Semitic?
Yes, of course, but no one's given 10 million quid to the Labour Party and
not recently. No,
called for a Jewish MP to be shot.
No,
ever.
It's not anything the same. No. But I'm surprised why the Prime Minister didn't decide to go on anti-Semitism. I just see it's. I don't know. Maybe they're deciding
But he did
to talk
later,
about...
and Starmer correctly said, "I have changed." It reminded me of when
I've
Tony
changed
Blair
my party.
said to John Major, I'm leading my party. He's following his. We're in that kind of territory now.
Yeah. What was his comment? Was something like I've changed my party. He's scared of his, which was a nice line. And he does look really weak after this entire 24 hours, and that's sort of what I'm trying to. We're all a bit exhausted about this row, I think, and now looking to what it actually means for the party and for the government, for Parliament. It just makes Rishi Sunak look like a really weak Prime Minister that's just in the pocket of his cabinet and is taking their lead on this. And obviously he felt like he was must have felt like he was bounced into a corner by Kemi Badenoch's statement yesterday.
And on it goes. For what, months? What do you feel about May as a potential election?
I don't think May's going to happen. I still don't think it's going to happen. Well,
nor do I.
Look at the glum faces on the Conservative backbenches. Is that a kind of party which you think is ready to fight a general election? Let alone call one. There's just so much anger, despair and sadness on the Tory backbenches right now. And, completely fair enough. There's a poll that's just come out in the last few hours showing that they're now on the lowest vote share since Liz Truss. And one of the political pollsters commented the last time that a leader was doing so badly, they resigned the week later.
Who was that?
That was Liz Truss.
Oh, sorry.
The Tories on the lowest vote share since Liz Truss on 25% and Labour on 43%. And why on earth would you call an election right now?
And that's on that poll. On some other polls, they've gone lower than that, haven't they? I've seen them on 18.
Yes, I think this is the lowest vote share in comparison with the two numbers. I think that's what the difference is between some of these. But yes, it's not looking good. Why on earth would you call an election right now? Things are looking dreadful.
Who's the king
Conservative
across
Party.
the water? There isn't one really, is there?
There's no one. There's just no one there. And like I say, Kemi Badenoch is repeatedly putting her head above the parapet and causing the Prime Minister a little bit of irritation from the sidelines. But I don't think I don't think her team would want to admit that she is ready and waiting in the wings to come and swoop in anytime soon. I think she would love to be the Tory leader after the election.
After a cataclysmic
because
defeat.
they need to give someone the fall guy, and that Rishi Sunak at the moment needs to be that fall guy. And there was a meeting between the Prime Minister and Sir Graham Bodie, the 1922 backbencher, earlier this week. There have been rumours that more letters have gone in of no confidence in the Prime Minister in the last few days. I don't know how much I believe that talk, but there is so much unhappiness. There is real despair in the depths of the Conservative Party, and it just feels like nobody is coming in to save them now.
While I have you, what's the convention? A few people are telling me that they're obviously still watching on screen while listening to you and I, that Diane Abbott is trying to catch the Speaker's eye. She's got to her feet on a few occasions.
Mm-hmm.
If I was Speaker, I'd be tempted just to let her have her say at the moment, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, so she's doing what we call bobbing, so trying to catch the speaker's eye. So if there's time, I imagine the speaker would want to call her to speak. Right. There is a list of people that have pre-prepared questions every week at Prime Minister's Questions, and they go through the list. But I imagine on a week like this, you'd want to hear from Diane Abbott, and I imagine the speaker will be sympathetic to her, and if she does, we will take right through there.
Of course we will. If she is invited to ask a question, she may not ask a question. She may make a contribution, but we shall carry that. And if it doesn't happen on our watch, I'm sure Sheila will as well. It is a mad little period then of British politics, because everything is falling apart for the party of government.
The country's falling apart. Nothing works.
Country is broken, as a best-selling book has explained in great detail, I'm told. Haven't read it. Hate that guy.
Who?
And yet the prospect of an election is months and months away.
I think we've been in this. We've been in this for 3 months. We've been in this limbo, haven't we? And
it does feel like a limbo.
It does. And
still,
the government aren't doing anything. You know, the MPs come in on a Monday afternoon and they leave by a Wednesday. Like, there are people who will be going home today, back to their constituencies, in a desperate attempt to try and cling on to their seats. And Parliament will be dead again by Thursday, Friday, and nothing is going on. You know, we've got private members' bills later this week on a Friday where backbench MPs try and get their stuff through the Commons. But in terms of our government agenda, what really are we waiting for? The prisoners' bill, which we've been told is been delayed yet again, despite Alex Chalk saying that we're actually running out of prison spaces and we really need to pass these laws now. But they're worried that they're going to face a backbench rebellion from the likes of Suella Braverman, who is going to try and amend it and cause yet another headache for the Prime Minister. And we're still waiting for the Rwanda bill to get back from the Lords. What else other bits of legislation are we waiting for? Rishi Sunak's smoking ban still hasn't come through. I think he'll want to do that at some point. But apart from that, can you name any real bits of flagship laws that this Parliament are expected to get through before this election? I'm sure there is much more to do, but I don't think any of it is really a priority.
It's just very odd. And finally, I often cite Mr. McAuber at times like this, and the old line from David Copperfield, "Something will come up." I can't imagine what, even in his most fevered imaginings, Rishi Sunak is lying in bed at night.
What is he hoping for? I don't know. A positive summer where, we had a slight slither of good news from some GDP looking slightly more up to date. Is that the start of things to come? Could interest rates start to fall? Could we have a lovely summer of sport? We've got the Olympics coming up, the Euros maybe. I don't know. I really don't. But it really does feel like we're pulling, reaching our hand down the back of the sofa, trying to find some hope for the Conservative Party. And I just don't. I cannot see where it's coming from.
Lint.
Yes, I'm not pulling up much from behind the back of the sofa. I'm shaking the Tory magic money tree, and there's nothing coming out.
12:30. Thank you, Natasha. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. It is 12:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I nearly wrote a book about trolls once. I can't remember whether I ever told you this. I was approached some years ago to do it when there was still a sort of novelty value attached to people who seem to spend their entire lives on social media, desperately trying to attract the attention or get under the skin of people that they were unlikely ever to meet in real life. And it started off being weird, and then it became slightly troubling, and then it became funny, and then it, just as things often do, became a little bit meh. You just sort of had a curious mixture of, God, these poor old souls, and then possibly a sense of relief that every minute they spent trying to insult you online, they weren't actually inflicting their vile personalities on their family. But I didn't write it because I didn't think it'd be interesting to anybody else. Something's changed since then. Because, of course, what we once called trolling has moved into whole new territories. The idea of pursuing personal vendettas against personal individuals because you didn't like them or you hated the fact that they were constantly proved right about Brexit changed, for me at least, immeasurably during the pandemic, when trolling sort of transmuted or transmogrified into a sort of weaponized dissemination of conspiracy theories, coupled with vile ad hominem and ad feminem attacks on journalists and public figures who were interested only really in reporting the truth. But if you're a conspiracy theorist, the thing you hate most in the world is the truth. And Mariana Spring has written a superb book about that process. It's called Among the Trolls, My Journey Through Conspiracy Land. You'll know Mariana through her work as a disinformation and social media correspondent, indeed the country's first. And indeed, there is an arresting line, which we'll start with. My name is Mariana Spring, and some of my trolls say they want to kill me, which conflates the two worlds I've just described, Mariana. The difference between people just taking against you for various odd reasons because you're on the telly or on the radio, and people taking against you because you insist on shining lights into the darkness where they dwell.
Yeah, I think, I investigate a very particular social media world, one that is infected with disinformation, hate, conspiracy theories, and I look at polarisation and algorithms too. And lots of that has made me very much a kind of lightning rod for a certain type of committed, I often refer to them as conspiracy theory activists almost. Part of targeting me is part of pushing a particular narrative or attempting to kind of undermine me and the journalism I do. And in the book, I spend a lot of my time going out and meeting all kinds of different people who have become caught up in this, whether it's the people harmed or the trolls themselves, the conspiracy theorists, and also obviously holding the social media companies to account, because that's what this is sort of all about.
Where did your interest begin on a personal level? Because presumably it was before it kicked in on a professional level.
It was. I was at university in 2016 when the US the US election was happening, and it was at that time there were loads of allegations about foreign influence operations, Russia, and I became really interested in particularly the way that social media can affect our democratic processes, or how social media affects, I think, the fabric of our society. And the journalism I do, I hope, goes kind of beyond tech journalism in that traditional way, but actually looking at the kind of sociology of this all, like how does it affect the way our world works? And so when I started, around the time I started doing this job, we had, the 2019 election. We obviously had the pandemic, which resulted in this huge proliferation of conspiracy theories and disinformation. And so for me, I think it really started there. I thought, oh, hang on a second, this thing I've grown up with is now affecting the fabric of our societies, really.
We did something during lockdown that I thought we probably learned from you, actually, which was I didn't want to open up the phone lines to people telling me that Bill Gates was trying to inject a microchip into my bloodstream that would track all of my purchases and give him, I forget the details.
It's quite hard to remember.
Well, that's one of the points you make powerfully, is that they sort of leach into each other, don't they, these conspiracy theories? But what we discovered was that by speaking to people who loved the people who believed that Bill Gates was trying to inject microchips into our bloodstream, you got a much clearer picture and a much more poignant picture of what's going on than you would do simply by talking to the victims of the conspiracy.
Yeah, and I think it's important sometimes, and I do this in the book, to separate between the true believers, so to speak, and then the people who are perhaps more cynical, the non-believers, although I put a question mark at the end of that. Because there are people who, can make money out of this, they grow their followings, they feel powerful, important, and then there are their devoted followers who are often people who genuinely believe the most extreme conspiracy theories. And here we're not talking about legitimate concerns and questions people can have. We're talking about people who believe almost everything is a hoax or that it's staged. The problem when they fall down that rabbit hole is that they become increasingly isolated. And for the people close to them, it's really hard to sort of help them get back out of that rabbit hole and to help them, they have an entirely new worldview, belief system.
And it's everywhere. This is socioeconomically speaking. Everyone will know someone, at least, or possibly know someone who knows someone who's caught up in this stuff. Middle-class dinner parties. Everywhere there'll be someone who says something about vaccines or something about 15-minute cities or something about New World Orders or something about the WEF, the World Economic Forum. I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary how it has reached parts that previous generations of conspiracy theories, you look at David Icke a bit in the book, he's the name I would have reached for 10 years ago, probably alone, actually. I probably wouldn't have been able to reach for any others. That now that they gloss over and they blend into each other and they're everywhere.
Yeah, you almost have to have a dictionary of conspiracy theory sort of language. You have to learn to speak it, and I talk about that a bit at the start of the book. But, anyone and everyone can be affected by this. And I think we all like to think in some ways that we're immune to it. But almost everybody I speak to knows someone, maybe it's a next door neighbour, a colleague, a friend, a family member, who's really fallen into this stuff. There are lots of stereotypes, perhaps misconceptions we have about people who believe conspiracy theories, this idea that they are stupid or mad. And actually what I've found on the whole is that they're not those things. They're curious, engaged, hyper-engaged on social media and deeply distrustful.
And also dedicated to the idea that they are trying to save the rest of us from specified and sometimes unspecified ills. So that there is an almost a warped altruism in play here.
Yeah, I was at a conspiracy theory rally in Totnes in the southwest of the UK, and I met this woman called Natalie, and she was one of the people who I would class as a true believer, and she genuinely was convinced that her family were going to be killed and controlled by these overlords who were carrying out this unspecified plan. And in the middle of our conversation, she burst into tears. And for me, that really kind of signified how deeply she believed this stuff, and how there are some people who are so far down this rabbit hole, they're terrified. And I think that's something we should all be really worried about, because they don't trust anything anymore.
I mean, as journalists, it's odd, isn't it, when people in your own social circle start talking about mainstream media or talking about false flag operations, or claiming that even wars are not unfolding in the way that they're being represented on the BBC or Channel 4. And you have to say, well, that these are my friends and colleagues that you're talking about. If there is a conspiracy going on here, then you do realise that I am part of it. And they kind of don't know where to go on that point.
That's what's difficult, is often, when you present people with the evidence, if you turn around and say, well, I know this person, they've been there, they've seen it with their own eyes, this is true. That doesn't convince them, and they move on to saying something else. And that's why I often focus on that question of why rather than what. I think sometimes when you get kind of caught up in the what someone believes, you don't really get very far. Whereas if you start to quiz why they have become so distrustful, often legitimate concerns, fears, they feel let down, they feel as though they just can't trust anything anymore. That's when you start to be able to uncover, I think, a lot more about how this all works and the way social media is affecting them as well.
And this is where you're particularly powerful on the threat that this poses to democracy itself, because an uninformed vote is not really a proper vote at all, or a misinformed vote, or a vote born of conspiracy theory is a threat to what we understand democracy to mean.
Yeah, a lot of the people I meet who are very deep into what I call conspiracy land in the book are people who almost position themselves totally outside of the political system. They feel very politically homeless, and they just do not trust or believe in the system. And there's one point where I'm talking to the editor of a conspiracy theory newspaper, and he says to me, wouldn't it be great if we just kind of got rid of all of the institutions and everything, and we just sort of cracked on and did our own thing? And I said, well, that's kind of like the systems we rely on. And there are, absolutely people raise legitimate examples of corruption, wrongdoing, bad stuff that happens. But if people no longer believe or trust in the systems that we rely on for society to work, we're in quite a tricky place.
Do you have a magic bullet? A lot of people listening will be wondering what to do if you encounter someone, because you mentioned presenting Natalie with lots and lots of evidence, and you will either burst into tears, move along, or I suppose in the worst case scenario, sort of attack you, which, I mean, you detail the statistics of the social media posts targeting you personally, you specifically in the book, and it's chilling. Even by my standards, these numbers are extraordinary. But do you have a get out of jail free card? Do you have something you do to move the conversation to healthier places?
I think there isn't necessarily a super straightforward solution. I think there is some really good advice that I've kind of gathered from speaking to people who've managed to leave these conspiracy theory movements, also from experts, psychologists, and all of them say, don't give up, keep having those conversations, be patient. Ask that question of why, try and identify the legitimate concerns, untangle them,
yes.
And that can often help.
Why do they want to kill your children? Why do they want to take over the world? Why does Bill Gates want to track?
What are you worried about?
Why do they want to do it? Cui bono?
Yeah, and I think often, people they believe kind of huge levels of competence, that so many people are in on these plans and plots, that there are no whistleblowers, all of these things that just would be incredibly hard, superhuman to pull off, and that are far beyond real examples of bad stuff that happens. So I think just by engaging in those conversations and not giving up, and it's why I keep doing the journalism I do, because I think it's so important that we don't just dismiss this stuff, but actually we take it seriously and apply the same investigative approach we have to journalism for years to other areas to this.
What was the most unpleasant character, going by record, that you sought to get a face-to-face with while doing the book? Or potentially dangerous. I mean, I don't ignore my adjectives.
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, in the chapter where I talk about the people who are actually spreading this stuff, there are a couple of encounters. One with a conspiracy theory newspaper editor who I agreed could interview me as well, because I'm really happy for people to ask me questions. And that was an almost 4-hour long interview back and forth, and that was very revealing, I think, more so in just like how the dynamics played out than necessarily what was said. There's also a conspiracy theorist who has tracked down Manchester Arena survivors of the bombing.
Yes, this is terrible.
Yeah, and I confronted him at a market stall he ran where, he later admitted to having spied on one of the survivors who has been left severely disabled after the attack, a young woman, but refused to answer any of my questions. And that, I was really struck by, for me, it felt like the first time this person had ever been confronted with the reality and the harm of what he'd done. And I think that's important here. This book, I hope, is me going out and investigating on behalf of members of the public who have had horrible things happen to them on social media, conspiracy theories, hate, really, really nasty stuff. And they feel as though no one's listening to them. Social media companies, policymakers, and, without reporters doing the work I do, I don't think anyone would know necessarily what's happening to them.
A word, if you would, to move into shallower waters on the Kate Middleton photograph that's doing the rounds at the moment. Could almost have been timed to perfection for the publication of Among the Trolls, My Journey Through Conspiracy Land, because some of the conspiracies, and I don't even look for them, but they've managed to cross my desk, are quite extraordinary. Is this a good example of some of the trends you describe in the book?
It really is. And I think there's a blueprint here that I've become really used to, but actually seeing it play out in a different context is important, which is there's, a perceived vacuum of information. People knew that the Princess of Wales wasn't going to be seen in public, but still they've got questions, genuine questions about what's going on. They want details. People then start posting. They want to know more. They they analyse every single thing that comes their way. Then there is this actual example of an edited photograph. It further fuels the really extreme conspiracy theories.
If they can do that, then they must be doing that.
The amateur sleuths are on it. I'm sure lots of people have seen the videos of people unpicking every single thing. It does have an impact as well. I mean, some of the content is very satirical, but some of it is, it's about trust in again here, the sort of royal family, and there's real people at the centre of this as well, and they're kind of at the heart of this storm. So it's I feel like my trolls would like to say maybe I've secretly edited the photograph.
That would be nice. That'd be great publicity.
Book, but that's not the case.
A few texts. You in the mood for this?
Oh yeah, okay, go
Ready?
for it.
You could probably end them if I give you the SAS Andy tells us there's no such thing as COVID vaccines. VM tells us that he doesn't believe in conspiracy theories, but he does think that the lies in the national press and even on the BBC lead people towards conspiracy theories. Mate, that means you believe in conspiracy theories. And this one says, "Hi James, do the Rothschilds and the Freemasons exist?" ? Hashtag Zinger. I added the hashtag Zinger on that one. So can we put a scale on it? I mean, do we have any idea of what percentage of the population is susceptible to or already enthralled to this sort of nonsense?
It's quite hard to quantify in that way. And I think it's fair to say, certainly from the journalism I've done and the kind of first-hand encounters, that there's it's very much a minority of people who really believe this stuff, but it's a committed minority. And most people won't be totally deep down the rabbit hole, as we call it, kind of into conspiracy theories, to the point where they genuinely believe terror attacks have been staged or wars have been staged or that the pandemic never really happened. But a lot of us, I think, can be vulnerable to anything that plays into our existing biases and views, particularly because of how social media works, right? We're constantly recommended stuff that we probably agree with or will react to. And I think that the most important thing for all of us, particularly in this massive election year, is to be able to step back and say, oh, hang on a second, why am I being recommended this? What is it doing? And I think as well, and I say this a lot, but thinking about social media and the impact it has, last year, not a single social media boss, exec, anybody would do an interview with me.
Really?
Social media companies are, in my view, as powerful, if not more powerful, than many governments.
They are.
If a cabinet minister wasn't doing interviews, we'd be kind of outraged. And so I think that we should all be thinking about, the conspiracy theorists who target me would like to say that I'm, a mouthpiece for X, Y, or Z, when actually I'm trying to hold to account some of the biggest and most powerful companies and very rich companies that are affecting how all of us live our lives.
On accountability. Mariana Spring, actually, Dave just wants to know quickly, are you aware of the one that says that spectacles, as in glasses, are a sham because you can heal your own eyes?
I'm not actually aware of that one.
You see, there you go. There you go. Quick heads up from Dave. Among the Trolls, My Journey Through Conspiracy Land by Mariana Spring is out now. And, as you can tell just from that brief exchange. It's absolutely extraordinary, and something which, simply by dint of listening to a radio programme like this, you will already have demonstrated a particular interest in. Mariana, good luck with the book. Many thanks for your time. Up next, here's a little quiz for you. If I told you that I had discovered, or indeed that Henry Scoop Riley had discovered, that Rishi Sunak, one of the donors who paid for Rishi Sunak's, one of the donors who paid for one of Rishi Sunak's recent helicopter journeys, Henry had discovered the identity of that donor, who would you think it might be this week? Apropos nothing in particular, completely random question. Bloke with lots of money to spare, possibly possessed of some slightly dodgy views, footing the bill for one of Rishi Sunak's entirely unnecessary helicopter trips. Well, Henry himself can tell you after this. I've been absolutely treating the breaks with contempt today. I can't believe we've got hardly any little time. So I'll give you I'm very sorry for that, actually, to everybody involved. So I'm going to shut up. Henry Riley's here. He's always good value. I don't know if you've been catching up with him on overnights lately, standing in for Clive Bull. This kid's got a future. Let me tell you that. So I'll be quiet now and let you just take it away. Oh. You can finish the show.
Goodness me. Thank you very much. Well, as you were alluding to earlier, James, I was checking the Register of Interest, which is basically where MPs have to declare all of their financial ongoings. And I noticed that on the 6th of December, it was declared that the Phoenix Partnership, TPP, which of course is owned by Frank Hester, had paid £15,900 for a helicopter trip to fly Rishi Sunak to, quote, a political visit. Now, that actually transpires. He went from Battersea helipad to Yorkshire. That was do you remember the sideways hammer trip when he's trying to whack in a nail?
In his defence,
he was told to do that, but that's why that particular trip was famous. Whilst you were talking to Mariana Spring, Marsha de Cordova-Reid actually raised that in the House of Commons.
In November, the Prime Minister accepted a non-cash donation to the tune of £15,000 from Frank Hester for the use of his helicopter. So will he reimburse him, yes or no?
No, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased that the gentleman is supporting a party that represents one of the most diverse governments in this country's history, led by this country's first British Asian Prime Minister.
And then lastly, James, in terms of the donations at the moment, so since 2023, £94 million has been donated to political parties in the UK. More than half of that has gone to the Conservatives. That's £48 million. The Conservatives have the highest amount of individual donors. So that's people like Frank Hester. That's 35 million of that 48 has gone on individual donations, £10 million from companies. And the big question is, what exactly does this money get spent on? £10 million from Mr. Hester. Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Sam Power, who is a senior lecturer in politics at the University of Sussex, and he told me.
At elections, above and beyond anything else, about 40% of all money spent at the 2019 general election, for example, is on leaflets and leaflet drops and mailing and your sort of boots on the ground campaign activity. So whilst we sort of think about, I suppose, social media and advertising as one of those big election spends, that's actually not nowhere near as much as your campaign activity, paying for leaflets, paying for those leaflets to be delivered as well. So that's primarily what money is spent on.
And then in terms of the other costs, so about 40% on leaflets and sort of campaign visits is Facebook advertising. He also told me that strategists and consultants, of course, cost a lot of money. And at election, as you imagine, those costs increase. So there are possibly some answers there to the question of why they can't or why they won't or why they haven't given it back. Henry Riley, great stuff, as always.
it from me for today. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. Quick word to Dave, who's been in touch just when I introduced Henry. He said, James keeps stum for 4 minutes. No way. In your face, Dave. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Lewis Goodall standing in for Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. Once or twice, 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 seen it happen.